Chapter 430. A Ganoderma immortal was an old Ganoderma that had grown up and cultivated into an immortal. Compared to heaven immortals, demon immortals, ghost immortals, and fiend immortals, Ganoderma immortals were the most popular type of immortals, and enjoyed a good reputation in all the worlds. Firstly, Ganoderma immortals were not good at fighting. Apart from the earth and would escape arts that they were naturally proficient in, they basically did not know any offensive magic. Secondly, Ganoderma immortals were very useful. Basically, Ganoderma immortals were all-purpose spirit herbs. No matter if one was injured in the fleshly body, soul, internal or external injuries, poisoned or sick, with just a tiny bit of flesh and blood taken from a Ganoderma immortal, they would be able to fully recover. Furthermore, the thing that made immortal Ganoderma so popular among all the immortals and other living beings in the world was its mild medicinal effect. As long as one could capture an immortal Ganoderma, there was no need to concoct it with seasonings. They could simply swallow it alive, and they would be able to obtain the energy essence and cultivation base that the immortal Ganoderma had cultivated for countless years without any side effects. Even if a mortal swallowed a Ganoderma immortal who was as strong as a gold immortal, he could still step into the realm of gold immortal in just a few months. Therefore, on Pangu continent and even in the celestial court, apart from some Ganoderma immortals who had extremely strong backers who could live safely in luxuriously decorated palaces and pavilions, where they would donate their blood for free every 300 to 500 years and have their backers concoct all sorts of spirit pills and medicines for them, wild Ganoderma immortals would basically be devoured by humans or some other living beings right after they showed their faces. Who would let go of such a great opportunity to rise to the top in a single bound? The crystallized Ganoderma in front of Wu Qi measured about 100 feet in circumference, and it had been growing for an unknown period of time. Unfortunately, he did not know when he was transcending his thunder tribulation, and his sentience was accidentally killed by the thunder tribulation, causing him to restrain all his energy essence and give birth to this Ganoderma horse. On the other hand, the Ganoderma horse was gradually absorbing the natural energy, eventually forming into an unprecedentedly crystallized Ganoderma horse. Wu Qi exerted the strength that was roughly equivalent to that of a Jin Dan cultivator and smashed his fist onto the Ganoderma horse. A crisp sound echoed out as Wu Qi's palm bounced back 2 feet high. He felt a dull pain in his palm, but the Ganoderma horse was not damaged at all. Wu Qi looked at the crystallized Ganoderma in surprise. He took out a flying sword and hacked at the Ganoderma a dozen times. However, the sword light shot out in all directions and sparks flew in all directions. Not a single mark was left on the Ganoderma. Lu Yi crawled up the slanting peak while trembling. He stood up, waved his folding fan and laughed arrogantly. "Don't waste your energy. This immortal Zoisha is definitely not an ordinary heaven immortal, so there's no way you can open its true form. If it was so easy to open this Ganoderma and take out the Ganoderma horse, I would have long consumed the Ganoderma fluid beside the Ganoderma horse. Although it can't make me immortal, it can at least prolong my lifespan." Looking at Lu Yi in astonishment, Wu Qi sneered and said, "I can't tell that you don't have high expectations. Just the Zoisha liquid is enough to satisfy you?" Lu Yi glanced at Wu Qi disdainfully. He patted the Ganoderma and said lightly, "You don't even know this? I'm a member of the human race. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are all part of the heavenly Tao. It's fine for me to prolong my lifespan, but consuming the Ganoderma horse and becoming an immortal? That goes against the commandment of the human race." With a flicker in his eyes, Wu Qi compared the confession he obtained from Yu Huan, and he could not help but nod his head silently. It was true that the human race was not allowed to cultivate and become an immortal. Furthermore, the human race could really resist the temptation of immortality after becoming an immortal. Very few of them would step onto the path of immortal cultivation for the sake of immortality. Perhaps this was the source of the secret conflict between the celestial court and the human race. Wu Qi smiled sheepishly and cast away these questions that were still far away from him. He pointed his finger at the cliffs on both sides. Immediately, large clusters of wisterias crawled over slowly, covering the crystallized Ganoderma completely. After that, he pulled Lu Yi up and flew towards Anhe City on a strong wind. What you said is true. Hehe, with this Ganoderma horse, we can definitely drag Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple into a great war. Staring at Lu Yi, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, but you haven't given us a plan on how to eradicate those immortal sections. Lu Yi waved his folding fan and said with a cold grin, what do you know? My master is a man with a broad mind, and his plan is more than enough to travel unhindered between the heaven and earth. As long as Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple start a war because of this Ganoderma horse, the other immortal sects will be dragged into the war when they hear the news. On the other hand, as long as we construct the 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation taught by Master here, no matter how many cultivators come, we will kill them all. Once we kill all the cultivators within 1 million miles circumference, we will surely succeed. Lu Yi's eyes flickered with excitement and fanaticism. Wu Qi just grinned coldly and did not respond to him. Suddenly, a few burly young men clad in green clothes slowly revealed themselves on the cliff. One of them, who was obviously the leader, crossed his arms before his chest and said with a low laugh, Lu Yi, this pretty boy is not bad. He has really convinced that Reverend Sanlu? Tiske, this is going to be fun. The other few young men chuckled at the same time, murmuring under their breaths. The general idea was, after wasting the energy left behind by such a rare Ganoderma immortal after transcending his tribulation, it would be a great loss for them if they could only deal with Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple. No matter what, they had to turn Anhe City upside down, dragging all the powers behind Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple into this, and wipe them all out in one fell swoop. The leading young man tilted his neck, gently stroking the crystallized Ganoderma immortal as he murmured, Unlook County. TSK, I can take back Unlook County from my hands, and teach those immortal sects who dared to invade the land of Diyu a hard lesson. I suppose my contribution this time is enough for me to be conferred the title of Marquis, right? Hehe, Master Yu is the one who taught me the best. How could I have so many ideas in the past? Upon hearing the name, Master Yu, the faces of the other few young men turned serious immediately. Their eyes shone with the same excitement and fanaticism as Lu Yi. Chi-Chi answered. After discussing the details of the operation in a low voice, the few young men whistled at the same time. Suddenly, a few huge black eagles, each with a wingspan of over 300 feet, swooped down from the sky. They leaped up and mounted the eagles, whistling excitedly as they drove them westward. When the few young men had gone far away, a stream of earthen mist suddenly sprayed out from near the Ganoderma. The yellowish mist wiggled for a while, and then Wu Qi walked out from it. Clapping his hands delightedly, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, Fortunately, all 18 celestial fiend puppets are my clones. Otherwise, I would have let go of such a precious treasure. This is a Ganoderma immortal after he failed to transcend his tribulation, and its divine sense was destroyed by the heavenly thunder, while its energy essence was restrained. After exclaiming for a while, Wu Qi carefully placed both palms on the Ganoderma, then gently released a thread of innate wood element energy and sent it into the Ganoderma. Suddenly, the Ganoderma immortal inside the Ganoderma emitted a faint green glow, which resonated with the innate wood element energy sent into it by Wu Qi. Gradually, the Ganoderma immortal's body became brighter, and a faint fragrance was slowly wafting out from the depths of the Ganoderma. This is not an ordinary heaven immortal, but the essence left behind by a middle-grade heaven immortal who failed to transcend his tribulation. Perhaps it is a 10th-tier heaven immortal? Oh my, if I can obtain the innate yang energy and cultivate an innate nascent divinity, with the power of this Ganoderma immortal and the Ganoderma liquid, I will definitely be able to transform my 7 stealing heaven meridians into chaotic stealing heaven meridians, and transform my fleshly body into an innate spirit body. At that point, all the magical abilities found in the scroll of stealing will be truly unlocked to me. Saliva nearly dripped down from the corner of his mouth. Wu Qi licked his lips, his eyes darting from side to side. Suddenly, he grinned coldly and said, Fine, let's set each other up. A bright green light burst out from Wu Qi's body, as he had injected nearly all the innate wood element energy in his body into the Ganoderma Immortal's body. Suddenly, the hazy Ganoderma Immortal in the core of the Ganoderma Immortal's body moved. Together with all the Ganoderma liquid around it, it transformed into a stream of green energy and shot out, flying quickly towards Wu Qi's body. At this moment, Wu Qi dared not to let this rare and precious natural treasure go to waste. Without hesitation, he took out a few pill bottles of the highest quality he found in Song Ao Immortal Abode, shoving the fist-sized Ganoderma Immortal horse and nearly 50 kilograms of Ganoderma liquid into them, then threw them all into the dark Yin energy vase. With the nourishment from the acquired water of pure Yin contained in the dark Yin energy vase, the Ganoderma horse and the Ganoderma liquid would not be harmed by anything. Instead, they would receive the help from the acquired energy contained in the spirit water, which would make the Ganoderma horse and the Ganoderma liquid grow stronger and stronger. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi glanced left and right, then suddenly reached his hand into the spirit breeding ring and pulled out a 2-foot-long big radish. This big radish was one of the crops grown by the people of Long Bow Kingdom in the spirit breeding ring. With a casual shake of his hand, Wu Qi crushed the radish into pieces, leaving only the core and the whitest and juiciest radish flesh, which transformed into a fair and tender horse-shaped statue that looked exactly like the Ganoderma horse. After that, he took out several tens of kilograms of drunken dragon incense, and from the dark Yin energy vase, he took out several tens of kilograms of transforming Yin water, which had the magical effect of corroding the fleshly body of immortal cultivators. Wu Qi mixed these two vicious things together, then used the Yin Thunder technique found in the Dark Yin Water scripture to inject 3 Yin Thunderbolts into the transforming Yin water. After that, he imitated what he had done earlier, and protected by the innate wood element energy, he easily sent all these things into the Ganoderma Immortal's body. Through the crystallized body of the Ganoderma Immortal, Wu Qi saw that its core was still a pool of purple liquid, and a white pony was hovering quietly in it. 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation? Wu Qi gave a strange laugh, then shook his head disdainfully and said, "The offensive strength of this formation is not enough, definitely not enough. The terrain here is not bad. There are mountains all around. Let me give you a little boost." After cleaning up all the traces in the surroundings, Wu Qi plunged into the ground excitedly and began to work diligently. After digging a tunnel 100 miles underground, he guided a part of the energies from several dozens of nearby energy veins to the bottom of this slanting peak. Then he constructed an extremely vicious formation, a formation that only allowed the energies to enter, and not allow them to leak out. All the energies were blocked in one spot, like a high-pressure boiler. Once it was detonated, the entire mountain ridges in the vicinity would be blown away. Fearing that the formation's offensive strength was not enough, Wu Qi had also constructed countless vicious restrictive spells underground, all of which came from the Tao of ghosts and deities taught by Princess Zhang. Once these restrictive spells were exposed, Wu Qi was going to put the heavy blame on Yu Miao's head. "Old fool, I'm waiting to see a good show from you." Using Lu Yi and the others' plan, he would eradicate all the immortal sects within 1 million miles of Anhe City, then replace himself as the city lord of Anhe City. With the power of Anhe City, he would heal his wounds, and at the same time, gather all sorts of information about Panga Continent, and put a load of shit on Yu Miao's head. Just when he was about to doze off, someone brought him a pillow. At the thought of this, Wu Qi could not help but burst into laughter. Chapter 431. All the people under the heaven thought that they had the pearl of wisdom in the palm of their hands, but in fact, they were all people who were being calculated by others. Wu Qi changed his visage and returned to Anhe City from outside the city. He did not return to the City Lord Mansion, but strolled aimlessly along the streets in Anhe City. With those celestial fiend puppets guarding the City Lord Mansion, it was no different from him being there. With 18 fiend immortals working together, Wu Qi was not worried about anything in the vicinity of Anhe City. Outside the city gate, the 4 monks had already vanished without a trace. The arrogant ones were afraid of the reckless ones were afraid of the reckless ones, and the reckless ones were afraid of the shameless ones. Following Wu Qi's order, Madman Shui ransomed all the oldest and ugliest prostitutes in Anhui City, then threw them one after another into the vats used by the 4 monks to beg for alms. Although the monks had cultivated their state of mind to be as calm as a dried well, they still could not bear the laughter of several tens of thousands of cultivators in Anhui City. They threw away the vats, spun, and fled in a sorry state. When Wu Qi returned to the city, over 100 old women were still standing at the city gate, cursing and scolding the monks. There was even an old lady who was so old that she was on her last breath, her body trembling as if she could die at any time. She was waving a big red handkerchief as she stomped her feet and roared, "Those bald donkeys! I've taken a fancy to their bald heads. That's the fortune they exchanged in their previous lives by smashing 100 wooden fishes and chanting scriptures. I've just hugged him and kissed him. Why did he run away? He deserves to be a bachelor for the rest of his life." On Pangu continent, no matter it was the territory governed by the human race or the territory governed by the immortal sex, there had never been such an unreasonable and unreliable thing. Just 100 or so old women were enough to scare the 4 great monks of Golden Pavilion Temple away. They were all eminent monks of the nascent divinity realm. The several tens of thousands of cultivators in Anhui City laughed so hard that their stomachs hurt. When Wu Qi entered the city, he could still hear these cultivators and mortals huddled together, discussing whether they could use the prostitutes to deal with those monks in the future. Wu Qi smacked his lips, listening to the discussions of the people around him complacently as he continued strolling along the main road. After walking for less than 15 minutes, Wu Qi suddenly saw a bookstore on the side of the road. There was even a sign hanging at the entrance of the shop. The words on it were very arrogant, selling illustrations of rare objects in the heavenly cycle. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat as he hurriedly walked into the shop. The scroll of stealing had recorded all the rare and precious items in the universe. But as Pangu continent was expanding at any time, there might be new and novel items emerging from the chaotic airflow every day. As the scroll of stealing was something from a long time ago, it could not contain all the rare and precious items that could be found on Pangu continent now. Wu Qi felt that it was necessary for him to update the information in Scroll of Stealing, as there would always be something new. The interior of the huge shop was completely empty. The 4 walls were filled with bookshelves, and on top of them were jade slips that flickered with a faint glow. The storage of these jade slips was not large, and the labels at the bottom were all labeled with names such as Catalog of Great Yu's Jing Province, Catalog of Great Yu's Huang Province, Encyclopedia of Demons in West Ocean, and so on. In the innermost part of the shop, behind a small counter, an inconspicuous old man, clad in a green robe and a small burlap hat, was seen sitting on a wooden chair, silently reading a paper book while shaking his head. Next to the counter was a 9-storied bookshelf, placed on top of which were 63 jade slips. The volume of these jade slips was at least 100 times larger than those jade slips, and the labels underneath them were labeled with names such as Catalog of 39 Easternmost Provinces of Diyu, and Guide to Spirit Herbs in 108 Perilous Lands Around Diyu. Wu Qi walked around the bookstore and finally came before the counter. He lightly knocked on the surface of the counter with his finger. The old man sitting behind the counter put down the book and slowly raised his head, squeezing out a simple smile on his wrinkled face. I have a customer. May I know what kind of things you need? My humble shop doesn't have everything you need, but I do have a few of all kinds of ancient books and illustrations." Wu Qi looked at the old man's smiling face and didn't say anything for a long time. When the old man was reading with his head lowered, he didn't seem to notice anything wrong, but when he raised his head, a pair of pale and lusterless eyes were revealed. This was obviously a blind old man. When Wu Qi thought of the old man's intoxicated look while reading, he felt very strange in his heart. After a long while, Wu Qi let out a hollow laugh and asked, "May I ask, do you have a map book here?" The old man put down the book in his hand and smilingly said, "Map book? Yes, the map book of Anhui County, as well as the maps of the surrounding provinces. However, you get what you pay for. The map book of Anhui County costs 1,000 gold ingots, or 100 low-grade energy stones. As for the maps of the surrounding provinces, each map costs 100,000 gold ingots, or 10,000 low-grade energy stones. For each additional province, the price will be increased by 50%. Blinking his eyes, Wu Qi carefully looked at the old man's pale eyes and curiously asked, "How large is the area of this province?" The old man laughed. "Customer, you don't even know how large a province is, and you're here to buy a map book? It seems like you're interested in traveling?" After a moment of silence, the old man nodded and said, "There's a Pegasus palace in the imperial court of Diyu, which raises all kinds of Pegasus with the bloodline of divine beasts. Among them, the fastest Pegasus can run 100 million miles in one day and one night." Showing 9 fingers, the old man flipped them back and forth, then smilingly said, "A Pegasus can run for 81 days, and the area covered by it is the standard of a province of Diyu dynasty. Therefore, you can buy a map of a province with just 100 lower-grade energy stones. That's a very cheap price." Upon hearing the old man's words, Wu Qi could not help but click his tongue. A province is actually such a huge piece of land? After a moment of silence, Wu Qi lowered his voice and asked, "Then, do you have a map of the entire Pangu continent?" While Wu Qi was pondering and did not say a word, the old man was trembling as he pulled out a coarse clay tea bowl from under the counter, then slowly took a sip of tea. Upon hearing Wu Qi's question, the old man sprayed out a mouthful of tea and began to cough violently. It was as if a tea leaf was stuck in his throat. The old man's face turned red from the coughing, and his breath was stuck in his throat. Wu Qi hurriedly went behind the counter, massaging the old man's chest with one hand and supporting the back of the old man's neck with the other. With a gentle shake, he shook the thick and long tea leaf out of the old man's throat. The old man coughed and finally, his breathing became smoother. He panted a few times before he could breathe normally again. Rolling his eyes and giving Wu Qi a glare, the old man murmured, "Please don't joke with me, my guest. You nearly choked me to death. The map of Pangu continent? Hehe, apart from the Pangu's mountain and river map in the imperial palace of Yu dynasty and the cosmic mirror of rivers and mountains in the celestial court, which can show the whole face of Pangu continent, who can know what Pangu continent looks like now?" Picking up the tea bowl and taking another sip, the old man shook his head and said, "If you are a high-ranking immortal official of the Celestial Court, you can still get a part of the map of Pangu continent from the Celestial Court. That is a territory that has been plundered by people for at least a few hundred times, and only a few leaves are left. The Celestial Court is still busy sending reliable immortals to plunder the maps of those new places. How could they possibly provide the maps to someone else?" Stunned, Wu Qi asked hurriedly, "What about Diyu?" The old man twitched his lips and said with a grin, "What about Diyu?" The prefectural governor of a county would have the maps of the nearby counties. The prefectural governor of a prefecture would have the maps of the nearby prefectures. Other than that, the generals who were stationed at various places would have the corresponding maps of their armies. As for the maps of the entire Pangu continent, TSK, perhaps apart from the current human emperor, no one can have them. Wu Qi fell silent. Frowning helplessly, he heaved a long sigh and said, "Well, old man, do you know a place called Yuxiong Plain?" The old man's pale eyes darted back and forth, then he looked at Wu Qi in surprise and said with a smile, "Don't you know that Yuxiong Plain is the capital city of Diyu?" Wu Qi clapped his hands and said, "So, the capital city of Diyu is in Yuxiong Plain? Then, is it difficult to go to the capital city of Diyu?" The old man shook his head bluntly and said, "It's fine for the human race to go there. Any immortal cultivator who steps into it will be cut into pieces." The simple and straightforward answer made Wu Qi feel suffocated in his heart. It's fine for the human race to go into Yuxiong Plain? Any immortal cultivator who steps into Yuxiong Plain will be cut into pieces? Wu Qi asked with a little resentment. Don't tell me those immortal officials of the Celestial Court will be cut into pieces as well? The old man nodded and said, "Not to mention those immortal officials, there was once a primordial immortal who strayed into Yuxiong Plain and was cut into pieces." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath and smacked his lips with difficulty. He laughed dryly and said, "A primordial immortal? What kind of existence is that? The old man twitched his mouth and said with a smile, a primordial immortal is indeed powerful, but any immortal cultivator who dares to step into the 10 billion miles around the capital city of Du will end up the same. Unless he is an angel sent by the great celestial emperor of the celestial court, the middle celestial jade pivot, no other immortal cultivator will be able to step into Yu Xiong Plain and die. Wu Qi fell silent. Sighing, he took out a small pile of upper-grade energy stones and said, "Old man, please give me the maps of the few nearby provinces, as well as the maps of the 108 perilous lands around you. And the maps of those rare and precious treasures as well. TSK. Immortal cultivators are not allowed to enter the capital city of Du? That's boring." While laughing, the blind old man took out a few jade scrolls and jade slips and handed them to Wu Qi, then quickly pocketed the upper-grade energy stones Wu Qi had placed on the counter. He smiled at Wu Qi and said, "It's a good idea to travel around Pangu continent, my dear guest. Young man, it's always good to travel and see more. But, for immortal cultivators, it's better not to get too close to the capital city of Yu Dynasty, provincial cities, county cities, and military garrisons, or you will be killed." Smacking his lips, Wu Qi shook his head, then took out a packet of spirit tea he collected on Myriad Immortals planet and gave it to the blind old man. "Well, I'll think of something from the celestial court. Tisk, it's just a map." Grumbling under his breath, Wu Qi turned to the old man and said with a smile, "Thank you, old man. This tea is nice. Try this." The blind old man was taken aback. Then, he smiled and took over the packet, then fished out another tea from the counter and gave it to Wu Qi. "You are very kind, my dear guest. After so many years, this is the first time that a customer has given me tea. The tea smells nice. But, my dear guest, you can try my tea as well. It has an extraordinary taste." Wu Qi took over the tea indifferently. After chatting with the blind old man for a while, he shook his head and walked out of the bookstore. After taking a few steps on the street, Wu Qi suddenly felt that something was not right. He jerked his head and looked over his shoulder. Where was the bookstore? Originally, the bookstore's neighbors were a restaurant and a butcher shop. But now, the bookstore was gone, and the restaurant and the butcher shop were right next to each other, and their business was booming. A chill rushed up from the bottom of his heart. Looking at the tiny packet of tea in his hand, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, "Did I just see a ghost?" It was broad daylight, and with Wu Qi's current cultivation base, how could a ghost dare to appear before him? Chapter 432. Without hesitation, Wu Qi took a few steps forward and exercised the mystic eyes of universe in front of the restaurant and the butcher shop. He gave it a careful look, but found no trace. The bookstore had disappeared without a trace, as if it had never existed in the first place. With one swift motion, Wu Qi grabbed a cultivator who was passing by. The nascent soul cultivator glared at him and was about to scold him, but Wu Qi tightened his fingers. Immediately, the cultivator's nascent soul was imprisoned by a tremendous force. The nascent soul cultivator, who was glaring at Wu Qi a moment ago, quickly bowed and asked in a low voice, "Senior, what can I do for you?" "Junior will definitely help Senior handle it properly." With a cold snort, Wu Qi pointed at the wall between the restaurant and the butcher shop and asked, "Was there a bookstore here?" The nascent soul cultivator was struck dumb for a long while. He glanced to the left and right, then with a look of astonishment on his face, he said to Wu Qi, "Senior, I've been staying in He City for over 100 years. The food and wine in Drunken Immortal in here are very delicious, and Old Yellow Butcher Shop is an old shop with tens of generations of history. Their pork and mutton are all of the best quality. As for the bookstore, in the entire He City, there is only one right outside the City Lord Mansion, and it specializes in selling some miscellaneous items." Swallowing a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty, Wu Qi pushed the nascent soul cultivator far away, then took a step forward and vanished with a teleportation. The nascent soul cultivator was thrown away by Wu Qi abruptly, causing him to stagger and fall to the ground. Thinking that he was protected by his master, he was about to scold Wu Qi, but when he saw Wu Qi suddenly vanish, he quickly covered his mouth and gave himself a few slaps on the face. Good heavens, where is that nascent divinity cultivator? No, I think he is a heaven immortal senior? Even teleportation is so easy. Lao Tzu was thrown to the ground by a heaven immortal today. What an honor! Happily, the cultivator rose to his feet, threw his head back and laughed complacently. Being tripped by a heaven immortal is a great fortune. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi teleported back to the City Lord Mansion and immediately exchanged his identity with the celestial fiend puppet who had disguised as him. Hastily, he found Lao Ai, who was deceiving Hidden Heart in the back hall of the City Lord Mansion. Lowering his voice, he warned, "You have to be extra careful in the next few days. Someone extraordinary has shown up in the city, and I just bumped into him." Lao Ai retracted the Buddhist light indifferently and asked indifferently, "What extraordinary figure?" Wu Qi hurriedly told Lao Ai what had happened to him. Lao Ai's expression suddenly changed. He stared blankly at Wu Qi and said, "He just disappeared into thin air for no reason." His bookstore is between the restaurant and the butcher's shop. Why didn't anyone else notice anything unusual? Wu Qi nodded vigorously and said in a deep voice, "That bookstore is definitely not targeted at me. It's just a temporary bookstore opened by the blind old man." But none of his neighbors are surprised by this. What an amazing method! Lao Ai shuddered. He sniffed and gave a cautious glance to the left and right as he said, "That Lu Yi is just a small potato. He's just here to stir up some trouble. I don't think in He City will stir up any storm, will I? With our current cultivation base, we can't afford to suffer such a little trouble. Why don't we leave now?" Glaring fiercely at Lao Ai, Wu Qi said with a cold grin, "Leave? Why should we leave? Fortune comes from danger. We just have to be careful. I'm determined to occupy in He City. Even if we have to leave, we'll do it when we can't hold on any longer." Wu Qi fished out a tea bag about the size of a baby's fist, given to him by the blind old man, and said in a low voice, "Come, let's see what's the secret of this tea." After signaling Hidden Heart to close the door, Wu Qi took out a small charcoal stove and a teapot, which were specially used to boil tea. With a casual point of his finger, a stream of clear water emerged from the air and poured into the teapot. Then, he fished out a few pieces of high-quality silver frost charcoal and lit a fire. Before long, the water in the teapot was boiled. When he opened the tea bag, Wu Qi found that it was a bag of coarse tea leaves. The leaves were huge, and the stalks were not even properly separated. The aroma of the tea leaves was strong and bitter, and one could easily tell that it was not a good tea. Wu Qi did not care about that. He threw about 50 grams of tea into the teapot, then turned on the fire and began to boil it. After boiling the tea, Wu Qi threw the charcoal stove back into the black dragon spirit ring, then took out 4 large bowls and divided the dark tea into 4 equal portions. Not only the tea, Wu Qi also divided the tea leaves and threw them into the bowls. He picked up a bowl of tea, stared at Lao Ai, smiled and said, "If you have the guts, drink this tea with me and see what kind of effect it has." Hee, I've made a deal with him, and I've even given him a bag of fine tea leaves. I don't think he would use poison to harm people, would he? Madman Shui and Hidden Heart turned to look at Lao Ai at the same time, but Lao Ai was sitting motionlessly on the bed. He crooked his lips and stared at Wu Qi as he said, "You drink first. A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. Lao Ai, can be considered half a gentleman?" Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a scornful glance, his eyes filled with disdain. Lao Ai's expression did not change. He was still sitting on the bed with a solemn expression, clasping his palms together as he stared at Wu Qi. Seeing how shameless Lao Ai was, Wu Qi was at his wit's end. He picked up a large bowl and took a deep breath, then carefully poured the tea into his mouth along with the tea leaves. It was bitter, and very astringent. On top of that, it was as if the tea was filled with soil, so coarse that it was hard to swallow. However, when Wu Qi tried his best to swallow the tea and all the tea leaves into his stomach, a warm stream of energy rose from his stomach and slowly circulated through his entire body. The aura of death that had accumulated in Wu Qi's body slowly melted away, transforming into pure energy, which was the complete opposite of the aura of death, and fused into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi was drenched in sweat, while a pure yang energy spread out from his body, causing the temperature in the room to rise significantly. Narrowing his eyes, Wu Qi felt that he was like a little seedling that was suddenly nourished by sunlight, water, and abundant fertilizer, growing bigger and bigger in an instant, turning into a strong and sturdy tree. His 5 internal organs were moving at the same time, and the innate spirit root in them was growing stronger at the same time. The vigorous life force made Wu Qi feel very comfortable. After drinking a bowl of tea, Wu Qi felt every aspect of his body was strengthened. Even his cultivation of 36 transformations of Heavenly Dragon showed signs of breaking through the 36th transformation realm at any time and entering the 35th transformation realm. He gave a loud and joyful laugh, then reached out his hand to grab the other 3 bowls in front of him. However, even though Wu Qi was fast, Lao Ai, Madman Shui, and Hidden Heart were even faster. Right when the pure yang energy spread out from Wu Qi's body, they had already reached out their hands and grabbed one of the bowls. While Wu Qi was laughing joyfully, they had already shoved all the tea and tea leaves into their mouths, swallowing them in one gulp. All of a sudden, Hidden Heart sighed lightly. A relic emerged above his head, with 3 white lotus thrones underneath it. Madman Shui laughed joyfully as a pinkish beam shot out from the top of his head, amidst which a tiny nascent soul was seen wheeling. Meanwhile, Lao Ai snorted coldly. Crisp, cracking noises could be heard coming from all over his body, while a large amount of extravasated blood kept oozing out from under his skin. A delightful, evil smile emerged from the corner of Lao Ai's mouth. Streams of pink light kept bursting out of his body, and gradually, a faint golden hue could be seen in them. Eventually, the light emanating from his body turned into a pure golden color. The wheel of delight shot out from the back of Lao Ai's head. 3 fist-sized relics could be seen hovering on top of the wheel, each glinting with a pinkish light. Underneath each relic were 3 golden lotus flowers, which made a total of 9 golden lotuses hovering behind Lao Ai's head. An intoxicating fragrance kept spreading out from Lao Ai's body, and amidst the fragrance was a bizarre force that could make one's nascent divinity sway. Looking at the strange phenomenon above Lao Ai's head, Hidden Heart could not help but nod and praise, truly worthy of being the true form of Bodhisattva. Such a marvelous divine ability is not something common monks like us can compare with. Instinctively, Wu Qi held his breath and sealed all the pores on his body. He even cast a few restrictive spells around him, isolating the fragrance wafting out from Lao Ai's body. Then, he sent a divine will towards Lao Ai and asked, "What trick are you playing?" Lao Ai's divine will quickly replied, "It is indeed an excellent tea, a supreme treasure. My injuries have fully healed, and I've already formed the lotus thrones and immortal soul. Now, I've attained the realm of heaven immortal and arhat at the same time. Once I unleash my aura, I will be able to attract the heavenly tribulation." While Wu Qi was about to mock Lao Ai, the celestial fiend puppet, who was pretending to be courteous with Lu Yi in the City Lord Mansion, suddenly sent him a clear divine will. "Retract all the strange signs. Quick!" Wu Qi cried out in a low voice. "The people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace are here, and their leader is Lady Qiao, together with her 2 gigolos. Hey, both of her gigolos are 33rd tier heaven immortals?" Right after Wu Qi's voice faded, a soft, coquettish and flirtatious voice was heard coming from the front. "I'm here. Why aren't you greeting me quickly, my children?" Rip. Upon hearing the voice, Madman Shui's trousers were ripped open. Wow! Hidden Heart, whose cultivation base was only at the peak of Jin Dan realm, could not resist the voice at all. As the cultivation technique of Euphoria Heavenly Palace and the Zen technique of Buddhist League happened to be the nemesis of each other, the devilish voice invaded his mind, causing blood to spray out from all 7 apertures of his. Wu Qi's body swayed slightly, but his face immediately returned to normal. Looking at the pale-faced old monk, he casually cast a spirit talisman on his body and helped him stabilize his mind. Among all the people, only Lao AI was not affected by the voice. Instead, he became extremely excited, hastily pulling out a new set of clothes and dressing himself. Judging from the voice, this woman is even more exciting than that coquettish vixen Su Mayer. I'm going to have a good time with her today. Before long, Wu Qi, who had retracted all his aura, followed behind Lao AI, whose body seemed to be glowing with a bright light. They came to the front gate of the courtyard to greet Lady Qiao, the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. As soon as Lao AI appeared, the faintly discernible fragrance on his body drifted away, filling the entire courtyard with his faint aroma. Suddenly, the flirtatious voice rang out, filled with an unconcealable joy. I didn't expect to meet such an amazing man like young master here. I wonder if Qiao is fated to invite young master into my tent? Chapter 433. The Euphoria Heavenly Palace was very imposing. Right in the center of the hall was a cloud bed, measuring 13 feet in both width and length. It was covered with white muslin and lined with silver fox fur, and was carried by 32 beautiful women. Countless fresh petals were hovering around the cloud bed. Faintly, a fragrant mist could be seen lingering in the air. Every now and then, the light muslin would flutter in the wind, revealing a beautiful figure that was faintly visible in the middle of the cloud bed. Before the cloud bed were 36 pairs of young boys and girls, who were carrying flower baskets and incense burners and sprinkling flower petals along the way. Purple smoke kept rising from the incense burners. Behind the cloud bed were 72 young men, who were extraordinarily handsome. They were clad in white, tight-fitting clothes, and had bulging muscles on their bodies. Behind them were a group of cultivators of all shapes and sizes. Some were male, some were female, some were old, and some were young. However, their eyes and brows were filled with a lustful aura. Among these cultivators, 2 middle-aged men stood out. One of them was clad in a green robe and a green hat, holding a green jade fan in his hand. All 10 of his fingers were decorated with jadeite rings, a jade belt around his waist, and a pair of jade boots on his feet. His entire body was shrouded in a jade gleam, and he looked like a huge cucumber. The other man was clad in a golden robe and a golden hat. His entire body was golden in color, and around his neck were tens of thick and large golden chains that looked like dog leashes. The golden gleam emanating from his body was so bright that it hurt one's eyes. This pair of supreme-grade figures stood among the cultivators. When they looked at someone, they did not use their eyes, but their nostrils. When they did not look at anyone, their nostrils would be pointed at the sky. They were so arrogant, so condescending, and so conceited. Perhaps even the emperor of the celestial court and the human emperor of Yu dynasty could not compare with them. These two should be the 2 gigolos brought here by Lady Qiao, the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. 2 of them were itinerant cultivators with a cultivation base of 33rd tier heaven immortal. One of them was Lord Jade, and the other was Mr. Gold. Among Lady Qiao's gigolos, these 2 men were the wealthiest, and their cultivation bases were the strongest. Therefore, whenever Lady Qiao went out, these 2 men who were willing to spend a lot of money were always by her side, and they were always willing to spend money for no reason. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and looked at Lord Jade and Mr. Gold. For a moment, he was tempted. According to Reverend San Li's memory, both of them were friends with some prefecture overseers of Yu dynasty and had been secretly mining some precious mineral veins that were forbidden by Yu dynasty. As a result, not only did they possess an extraordinary cultivation base, even the immortal items they possessed were of the best quality, be it in terms of quantity or quality. The delicate fragrance emanating from Lao AI attracted the attention of Lady Qiao, who was sitting on the cloud bed. She opened her mouth and invited Lao AI to be her guest. Instantly, the faces of Lord Jade and Mr. Gold changed. Lord Jade said in a cold voice, "Qiao, this brat is born strong and strong. Don't let him look like a silver spear tip and be tormented until his body becomes weak in just a few moves." On the other hand, Mr. Jean said in an even more blatant manner, "Qiao, luckily, our cultivation base is much higher than yours, so we can barely endure your tricks. Every year, We waste a lot of magic power and cultivation base in your stomach. I don't think this brat can withstand your plucking, can he? Wu Qi bowed his head and did not say a word. Just now, the celestial fiend puppet who had transformed into Reverend Sanlu had sent the news about the Ganoderma horse to Euphoria Heavenly Palace through a secret channel. Lady Qiao was delighted, and she could not wait to rush over here, as she was planning to investigate the slanting peak. Meanwhile, in the City Lord mansion, some servants who were loyal to the former City Lord, Master Jingyan, had also spread the news through some channels. As the 4 guardians of Golden Pavilion Temple were not far away from here, presumably, Golden Pavilion Temple had received the news as well. According to Lu Yi's plan, when Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple started fighting over the Ganoderma horse, the other immortal sects in Anhui City would receive the related information as well. At that point of time, there would be a good show to watch. While pondering over all these, Lao AI had already burst out laughing and said, "Look like a silver spear tip? Who dares to say they have an indestructible body in front of me? I Lao. Lao Qianye has an extraordinary innate talent, and that is not something you can understand." The white gauze on the cloud bed fluttered, and a purple smoke drifted over, rolling up Lao AI and sending him into the cloud bed. Lady Qiao's seductive laughter was heard coming from the cloud bed. "Good man, let me give you a good test on your martial arts. If you exaggerate, don't blame me for being merciless." Although the white gauze had covered Lao AI's body, his evil voice could still be heard clearly. "Rest assured, Palace Master. I'm just worried that Palace Master might not be able to withstand my plundering, and might damage Palace Master's energy essence with just a few moves. That would be a serious offense." Lady Qiao let out a wild and unbridled laugh, which was as sharp as a blade, piercing into one's ears and giving one a sharp pain. She laughed aloud and said, "Io, Sanlu, you have taken in some pretty good subordinates. Lao Qianye. What an interesting name you have. Which man dares to say he can work hard for 1,000 nights in front of me?" Faint noises of clouds and raindrops could be heard coming from the cloud bed, as large sheets of clouds drifted out from under it. A few ladies standing next to the cloud bed gave a soft cry, and the group of cultivators surrounded Chi-Chi on the cloud bed and flew southward. After flying for over 1,000 miles southward, they had completely left Anhui City's cultivators' line of sight. Using their divine will, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold carefully scanned the surroundings a few times, and only then did they change their direction, heading straight towards the slanting peak which Wu Qi had prepared just now. Along the way, Lao AI and Lady Qiao could be heard shouting, laughing, and moaning, as well as all sorts of strange noises coming out from the cloud bed. However, the cloud bed was actually a superb magical item that was hard to come by. The white gauze was fluttering on the outside, bringing up a large amount of white smoke that lingered in the air. No one could see what was happening inside with their naked eyes, and no divine will could penetrate through it. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi could clearly see the intense battle going on inside. However, he was not interested in this shady business. No. Wu Qi was not interested, but the part of his soul that belonged to Lu Xiaobai was very interested in this scene. Quietly, he exercised the mystic eyes of universe. Feeling helpless, Wu Qi turned his head around stiffly. With a pair of eyes that emitted a faint gleam, he saw through the white gauze and saw the intense battle going on inside. It was as if 7 to 8 mad bulls were slamming into each other. Lao AI and Lady Qiao, who had a graceful appearance and a dignified expression that made her look like a saintess, were coiled around each other like 2 great pythons. Using all their strength, they were devouring each other's energy, magic power, cultivation base, blood essence, and energy essence. They were crazily devouring and extracting everything that could be extracted from each other. Both of them had their skins suffused with a bizarre pinkish hue, especially Lady Qiao's skin, which had a tinge of an unusual blood color. Her eyes were showing the whites of her eyes, her body was trembling and twitching, while saliva kept dripping down from the corners of her mouth. Obviously, Lao AI's Great Sun Divine technique was much stronger than the cultivation technique she specialized in. In this head-on battle, Lady Qiao had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Not only was her body in a disadvantageous position, Even her mind had been controlled by Lao AI. Her soft moans, loud laughter, every single word she said, were all under Lao AI's control. Standing next to the bed, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had their faces twisted and unsightly. From time to time, they would throw angry glances at the bed, but they could never imagine that their beloved girl was on the verge of losing her cultivation base. In just a short period of time, all her cultivation base would be completely absorbed by Lao AI. As Lao AI had just stepped into the ranks of Heaven Immortals, if he could obtain all of Lady Qiao's energy, perhaps it would be possible for him to break through another tier. Shaking his head, Wu Qi forcibly dispelled the tiny bit of curiosity and beautiful thought in his mind. Silently, he recalled the face of Princess Zhang Lu, forcing his restless heart to calm down. He was laughing in his mind, wondering how many people Lady Qiao had harmed with such amorous tactics. Finally, she had met her nemesis, Lao AI. In Reverend San Li's memory, all the male disciples of Euphoria Heavenly Palace were once Lady Qiao's opponents on the bed, and each of them had their yang energy drained by her. Take Reverend San Lu as an example. If not for Lady Qiao seizing a great amount of his yang energy, he would not have remained an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. A wicked man will always be tortured by another wicked man. TK, as long as I can control Lao AI and prevent him from harming good people, I will be rewarded with immeasurable virtues. At the thought of this, Wu Qi nearly put his palms together and bowed to Reverend San Lu, uttering the name of Buddha or something. The company drifted into the eastern lofty mountain. The sun had set, and a bright moon was rising from the distant horizon. Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the bright moon. He was curious, wondering how big the moon must be, since Pangu continent was such a huge landmass, for the people on the ground to have such a clear view of it. And the moon essence contained in this bright moon was simply appalling. Right when the moonlight sprinkled down, their bodies were immediately covered with a layer of sparkling silver gleam. Wu Qi could not help but gasp. Pangu continent was indeed a blessed land for cultivators. No wonder all the immortal sects were willing to invade Yu Dynasty's territory, regardless of the danger. The moon essence here was pure and rich. Not only was it dozens of times stronger than the moon essence Wu Qi gathered with the formation back on Green Cliff Planet, it was also pure and without any impurities. As long as one absorbed the moon essence into one's body, one would not need to circulate the energy, as it could be directly transformed into the prime energy of a cultivator. After entering the mountainous area, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold took the initiative to guard the front and back of the company. Lord Jade took the lead and cleared the way, while Mr. Gold brought up the rear about 100 miles away. Along the way, as long as they found a place where someone might be hiding, or a place with a slightly abnormal aura, they would be swept away by the sword beams unleashed by both men. Even a few mountain rats who had just gained sentience were shredded into pieces by the sword beams. After advancing cautiously for over 2 hours, the company finally arrived at the slanting peak that Wu Qi had just visited during the day. Lord Jade and Mr. Gold rushed up together, pulling away the wisteria at the root of the slanting peak, revealing the huge crystallized Ganoderma. Wow! Many cultivators from Euphoria Heavenly Palace were knowledgeable, and when they saw the huge Ganoderma, they immediately cried out in surprise. Without saying a word, both Lord Jade and Mr. Gold unleashed their sword beams and hacked at the Ganoderma. Clang! 2 loud clangs rang out as the sword beams were pushed back, nearly cutting both men's bodies in half. Lord Jade turned his head and cried out hastily, "Qiao, this is the remains of a Ganoderma immortal. How can we open it?" Lady Qiao did not say a word. She and Lao AI were at a critical juncture. Lao AI was pressing against Lady Qiao's entrance, and Lady Qiao's cultivation base was stuck at the entrance. As long as Lao AI exerted a little more strength, all the immortal energies that Lady Qiao had painstakingly accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years would become Lao AI's. Right at this critical juncture, a strong gust of wind suddenly came rushing down from above. Without raising his head, Wu Qi spun and began to walk away. While running, he cried out, "Not good! Enemy attack!" Even in the midst of all this, Wu Qi did not forget Louis. He grabbed Lu Yi by the neck and dragged him out of the place. Above them, a bronze statue of Vajra, standing 1,000 feet tall and emanating an ancient and dignified aura, was smashing down from above. The statue of Vajra had a fierce look on its face, and it was holding a Vajra scepter in its hand. It had a very lifelike face, as if it was a real Vajra who had descended to the mortal world. Hovering above the statue of Vajra were 18 old monks clad in bright red kasayas, forming a circle and performing the Vajra devil-subduing incantation with their hands. How dare you, an evil cultivator, covet a rare natural treasure? This treasure is fated with Buddhism. Retreat now, evil cultivator. Chapter 434. A strange howl rang out as the huge bronze statue brushed past Wu Qi's body and smashed down. Wu Qi narrowly avoided the attack of the statue. However, he intentionally shook his wrist, causing Lu Yi's body to tilt to one side. The edge of the statue, which was actually a corner of the fluttering cloth on its back, gently swept across Lu Yi's body, from his right knee all the way to his ankle. It scraped his right calf and crushed all his bones and muscles. Lu Yi howled and hissed in pain, tears and mucus spraying out from his eyes. Wu Qi grabbed him by the neck and sprinted away, while transforming into a gust of wind and shouting, "Fear not, brother Lu Yi. With me here, I'll definitely protect you." While Wu Qi was shouting, an old monk clad in a red robe sitting cross-legged on top of the statue suddenly saw Wu Qi, who had transformed into a gust of chilly wind and was running away. Casually, the old monk threw out a Buddhist bead and cried out sternly, "Kill all the evils. Evildoer, face your death." Upon leaving his hand, the black sandalwood bead transformed into a ball of thunderbolt the size of a basin, whistling through the air and thrusting towards Wu Qi's back. The strong wind stirred up by the bead even threw a few gold core cultivators of Euphoria Heavenly Palace flying away. He turned his head and saw the Buddhist bead coming at him from the corner of his eyes. With a wave of his hand, a defensive magical treasure named Green Cicada Wings, which was one of the spirit items given to him by many seniors of Yuan Hua sect before he left, flew out of his hand, transforming into a sheet of green mist that enveloped Wu Qi's back. Right when the green cicada wings were unleashed, a shrill, heart-wrenching cry of cicadas rang out. Several hundred blurry, fist-sized green cicadas flew out, wheeling rapidly inside and outside the green mist. Their thin membranous wings were flapping rapidly, while rings of white wind blades that could be seen with naked eyes flew out and greeted the thunderbolt transformed from the Buddhist bead. With a loud bang, the lightning exploded, and the longan-sized Buddhist beads were shattered by the green cicada wings. The scattered thunderbolts transformed into several dozens of flame beams and shot out in all directions. Wu Qi flicked his wrist again, and one of the flame beams fell onto Lu Yi's buttocks. In just a blink of an eye, his pants were burned to a crisp, and a thumb-sized purple thunderbolt flame stuck on Lu Yi's buttocks, producing a sizzling noise as it burned. Very soon, a fist-sized pit was formed. Lu Yi had nearly fainted from the pain from the wound on his calf, and now, Wu Qi had played another trick on him. Lu Yi's eyes went wide and he let out a heart-wrenching howl. His scream was so loud that it even drowned out green cicada wings chirping. Lu Yi, who was originally handsome and elegant, suddenly changed his expression. His fair and handsome little face suddenly became as yellow as dried cured meat. His whole body was covered in cold sweat, like a small stream was spurting out. Grabbing Lu Yi's neck, Wu Qi dragged him and fled quickly. While fleeing, he kept shouting, "Don't worry, brother Lu Yi. With me here, you won't die. You definitely won't die." A loud boom was heard coming from several miles behind them. Riding on the frighteningly huge bronze statue of Vajra, the 18 old monks smashed viciously onto Lady Qiao's cloud bed. Thousands of layers of white mist burst out from the cloud bed, trying to block the impact of the statue of Vajra. However, among the 18 old monks, at least 3 of them possessed the cultivation base of heaven immortals. Using the divine ability of Vajra subduing devils from the Zen school, they had formed a formation and activated the Vajra magical item that had been worshipped before the Buddha for countless years, transforming it into a gigantic statue of Vajra. The tremendous pressure brought by the statue of Vajra was comparable to the impact brought by 100 Mount Titians falling from a height of several tens of thousands of miles. Layers upon layers of clouds were shattered, and streams of auspicious light were seen drifting and dispersing. Amidst Lady Qiao's hoarse and despairing howl, the statue of Vajra smashed the cloud bed, smashing it straight onto the ground along with several hundred young boys and girls, handsome young men, and cultivators of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. The surrounding mountains trembled violently, as the statue of Vajra had sunk nearly 1 mile deep into the ground. Fearing that the person who was crushed under the statue would not die, the 18 old monks hovered several hundred feet above the ground, quickly performing incantation gestures with both hands while reciting the scripture of subduing devils. After that, they unleashed a beam of Buddhist light at the statue of Vajra. The statue of Vajra leaped abruptly, then unleashed countless thunderbolts that shot straight up into the sky. After that, a 7-colored Buddhist light came wheeling over from all directions, quickly transforming into a 7-colored beam that plunged straight down. Within the beam of light, a few ancient Buddha statues could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged. Their hands were performing the swastika incantation, and behind them, there were countless vague shadows of bodhisattvas, arhats, Vajras, heavenly kings, and many others. The 7-colored beam of light fused into the Vajra statues of Vajra Buddhas. The ground shook violently, and several dozens of mountains in the vicinity crumbled at the same time. Mountains toppled, rivers changed their course, and in many places, the ground was torn open with bottomless crevices. Water from the rivers flowed into these crevices and disappeared without a trace. An extremely sorrowful and indignant voice rang out, "Qiao, Qiao." It was not easy for me, Lao Qianye, to find the one I love, but you are actually killed by these bald donkeys. About 100 feet away from the crater created by the statue of Vajra, the ground suddenly exploded. Lao Ai carried Lady Qiao up into the sky, her body drenched in blood, her bones and tendons shattered, her head smashed like a rotten watermelon, and a golden glow rippling out from between her brows. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell with just one glance that there was a golden glow flowing out from between Lady Qiao's brows. It was a unique sign that her immortal soul was shattered, and the source energy of her soul was returning to the heaven and earth. 18 red-robed old monks laughed joyfully together and said, "Excellent, excellent. The culprit has been eliminated, and now, the world is once again clear and bright." The old monk who attacked Wu Qi just now cried out sternly, "What are you waiting for, evildoers? Could it be that you want to have your soul destroyed like this evil woman?" Covered in blood, Lao Ai gave those old monks a venomous look, then abruptly took a step forward and teleported several tens of miles away. "Just you wait, you bald donkeys. I won't let you go. I don't have the strength to avenge Qiao today, but once I become a primordial immortal, I'll definitely slaughter my way to Golden Pavilion Temple and slaughter all the bald donkeys in your temple." Tisk! The 18 red-robed old monks felt a sense of disgust in their hearts. It was not too late for a gentleman to seek revenge even after 10 years. Wait until you become a primordial immortal before you go to Golden Pavilion Temple and seek revenge? Ugh, how many primordial immortals are there in the Celestial Court? I reckon the number of top-notch primordial immortals can be counted with 2 hands, right? Wait until you become a primordial immortal before you come and seek revenge? Do you really want to avenge Lady Qiao, or do you not want to keep her alive? Suddenly, the ground cracked open again, from within which 18 celestial fiend puppets, who had transformed into Reverend San Lu and his companions, sprung out of the ground, carrying the filthy madman Shui. While fleeing at top speed like a gust of wind, Reverend San Lu cried out sternly, "I'll leave the remains of the Ganoderma immortal to you bald donkeys. Uncle Masters, senior and junior brothers, run now. These bald donkeys are coming at us menacingly, and they are not easy to deal with." The celestial fiend puppet, who had transformed into Minhua, cried out hoarsely, "Where there's life, there's hope. My fellow disciples, we need to flee now. Once we've accumulated our overall strength and become primordial immortals, we'll come back and settle the score with these bald donkeys." Led by Lao Ai, the group of celestial fiend puppets brought Lady Qiao's corpse and the unharmed madman Shui, fleeing at top speed in the direction Wu Qi fled. Their speed was so fast that the group of old red-robed monks, who had just unleashed a very powerful restrictive spell, did not have the time to chase after them. Therefore, they no longer had the time to chase after Lao Ai and his companions. All 18 celestial fiend puppets roared at the top of their voices. The remains of a Ganoderma immortal have been found here. Fellow Taoists, don't let these cruel and merciless old bald donkeys have it. Seize it, seize it. Once a mortal consumes a Ganoderma horse formed from the blood essence left behind by a Ganoderma immortal, even a heaven immortal will have a great improvement in his cultivation base. He has a chance of becoming a gold immortal, a gold immortal. These celestial fiend puppets did not have fleshly bodies, but were fiend immortals who had half fleshly bodies and half puppet bodies. When they roared at the same time, the sound waves spread to a distance of several thousand miles. All the mortals in Anhui City had heard the commotion, and knew that the remains of a Ganoderma immortal had been found in this mountain. The people of Euphoria Heavenly Palace were following closely beside Lady Qiao's bed. Lady Qiao was controlled by Lao Ai's evil technique, smashed to a pulp by the Vajra statue, and had all her energy essence sucked dry by Lao Ai. How could the rest of them withstand the joint attack unleashed by 3 heaven immortals and 18 nascent divinity cultivators? Apart from the celestial fiend puppets, Lao Ai, and madman Shui, all the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace were smashed to pieces. Only Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had a profound cultivation base, and they were quick to react. When the Vajra statue came smashing down, they did not dare to face the divine ability of subduing evil unleashed by the 18 old monks with the help of Buddhist items. Hastily, they teleported to one side. When Lao Ai fled with Lady Qiao's broken body, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold rushed back as if their parents had just passed away, crying and wailing, "Qiao, Qiao, how tragic your death is! We must avenge you! We must avenge you!" Amidst the shrill cries, Lord Jade casually threw 3 strangely shaped jade axes into the air, which transformed into 3 huge bright moons and thrust down towards the old monks. On the other side, Mr. Gold roared furiously and waved both arms. Immediately, countless golden blades, golden spears, golden swords, and golden axes blotted the sky, smashing down towards the old monks like a raging storm. Together, both of them exercised the divine ability of immortals, casually pointing a finger at the surrounding mountains. Immediately, several dozens of lofty mountains flew whistling up into the sky, compressed into small clumps of soil about the size of a fist in just a blink of an eye, then smashed down towards the 3 heaven immortal old monks amidst a very strong earth energy. Chi-Chi roared. Suddenly, an old monk of heaven immortal realm broke free from the formation and sped towards the clump of Ganoderma at the foot of the slanting peak, completely ignoring the attacks from Lord Jade and Mr. Gold. Meanwhile, the other old monks gave a loud cry. All 17 of them stood in the positions of the 8 trigrams and 9 palaces, while relics flew out from the top of their heads at the same time, transforming into a large sheet of Buddhist light that shielded the mountain ridges several miles in circumference. The Vajra statue, which was smashed into the ground just now, flew up slowly and sat cross-legged under the feet of the 18 old monks. Both of its hands locked into the mudra of indestructible Viduraja, unleashing a bronze light barrier that was as thick as a city wall. The attacks from Lord Jade and Mr. Gold smashed onto the Buddhist light barrier unleashed by the old monks, but they could only produce countless ripples, cracking and rolling the ground in all directions. However, no matter how hard they tried, they could not break through the defense of the old monks. The defensive divine ability of the Buddhist League was famous throughout the universe. When these Buddhist cultivators really put aside their pride and focused on defending with all their might, not many people could break through their Buddhist restrictive spells. The old monk who broke free was holding a shining golden blade in his hand. Without uttering a single word, he leaped onto the Ganoderma, swung the blade and hacked it down. A loud clanging noise rang out and sparks flew in all directions. The blade went at least 1 finger deep into the Ganoderma. Suddenly, several hundred loud shouts were heard coming from near and far. "You bald donkey, do you really think you can covet a natural treasure of this level?" Lights and shadows flickered in the surroundings as at least 5 heaven immortals, 30 nascent divinity cultivators, and several hundred nascent soul cultivators and Jin Dan cultivators rushed over from all directions. Chapter 435. In a small valley dozens of miles away, Wu Qi threw Lu Yi to the ground, panting heavily, and threw a bottle of medicinal powder he concocted to Lu. "Apply it yourself if you don't want to die. TSK, brother Lu Yi, you must remember my favor. If it weren't for me, would you have escaped alive?" Lu Yi grabbed the bottle with one hand. With a sallow face, he stared blankly at the mountain area where the battle was in a mess and dust was rising into the sky. "How did this happen?" he asked in a daze. "This is not what I planned. My 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation is not ready yet, so how did they know about it? How did this happen? Why did they come so quickly?" Wu Qi gave Lu Yi a sideways glance and did not give him an explanation. "It was impossible for them to go according to your plan. Therefore, I had to inform the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace in advance, so that they could know what was happening here. Putting aside the power of your 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation, how many heaven immortals can it deal with?" Since Wu Qi had already set up an ambush 100 miles underground, there was no need for your 4 gates immortal slaughtering formation. Wouldn't it be better to let the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace come here in advance and trigger the event? The best part was that when the event was triggered in advance, the people behind Lu Yi would not be able to react in time and could only act hastily. In this way, Wu Qi would have the upper hand. If everything went according to Lu Yi's plan, they would have the upper hand, and Wu Qi would be forced into a passive position, wouldn't he? Looking at the scene where the battle was in full swing, Wu Qi clicked his tongue and exclaimed, "This Lord Jade and Mr. Gold are really wealthy. Both of them are 33rd tier heaven immortals, and they have more than a dozen immortal items with them. Oh my, if they dared to go to outer heavenly realms, they would have been robbed long ago." Looking at the shadows of various weapons that kept soaring into the sky, Wu Qi knew that they were the unique signs of immortal items being activated. Seeing that, Wu Qi's appetite was greatly stimulated. A strange gust of wind came blowing, as Lao Ai came running over with the corpse of Lady Qiao in his arms. Her body was covered in blood, and her immortal soul had completely collapsed. Casually, he threw Lady Qiao's body onto Lu Yi's body and shouted, "Pretty boy, dig a hole for me and give her a proper burial." After all, it was just a romantic moment. "I'm not such a heartless person. Dig a deep pit and build a good coffin. If you don't do a good job, I'll kill you." Lu Yi's face turned blue with rage. "I'm Reverend San Li's advisor, my advisor. What are you doing? What are you doing?" A strong wind blew, amidst which Reverend San Lu revealed himself, bringing Madman Shui and Hidden Heart with him. He strode before Lu Yi and gave him a few dozens of slaps on the face. The slaps made Lu Yi's face swell up, and blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth, flowing down his cheeks and falling to the ground. Pointing his finger at the dumbfounded Lu Yi, Reverend San Lu bellowed, "How presumptuous! Whose advisor are you? Do I need to explain to you what I'm doing?" Then he gave Lu Yi a kick and sent him flying away, roaring, "Kid, your background is unknown. So what if you've really pointed out the true form of this Ganoderma immortal? Do you really think I can use your plan without any worries? Apart from the 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation, don't tell me you're going to come up with another 8 gates and 8 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation and drag me into it as well?" Lu Yi was struck dumb. He gave Wu Qi a look, then turned to Reverend San Lu. After a brief moment of pondering, he realized that what Reverend San Lu said did make sense. As an outsider who had just arrived in this world, he had suddenly come to Reverend San Lu and told him that he had a good plan that could help Reverend San Lu become the master of the area 1 million miles around in He City. No one with a normal mind would believe his words for no reason. Reverend San Li's reaction was perfectly normal. But it was not within Lu Yi's expectation. Laughing bitterly, Lu Yi picked up Wu Qi's medicine bottle and said bitterly, "Reverend, time will reveal a man's heart. Even if Reverend Sanla does not trust my words, you shouldn't have triggered this in such a hurry. Now that they are fighting each other, doesn't that mean the Ganoderma immortal is going to be taken advantage of by someone else?" Reverend Sanla snorted and ignored Lu. With a gloomy face, Lu Yi poured out a handful of medicinal powder carefully concocted by Wu Qi from the bottle. Clenching his jaws, he pressed the powder onto the fist-sized bloody hole on his buttocks, which was burned by the thunder flame. A shrill and miserable howl suddenly rang out from the woods. Lu Yi's body twitched violently as he fell to the ground, unconscious. Lu Yi knew that when applying medicinal powder to wounds, it would cause him some pain. But never in his wildest dreams did he expect that the medicinal powder concocted by Wu Qi would cause him such pain. Looking at the unconscious Lu Yi, Wu Qi shook his head and said with a cold grin, "This young fellow is quite interesting." Reverend San Lu and the other celestial fiend puppets were laughing coldly, while Lao Ai said leisurely, "Let's get this over with as soon as possible. I've absorbed all of Lady Qiao's cultivation base. TSK, as long as I unleash my aura, I will be able to transcend my heavenly tribulation and become a heaven immortal. Immortality, I never thought I would have such a day." Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a look, then sent him a voice transmission with his divine will. "Too bad, your immortality is completely controlled by someone." Lao Ai's face fell instantly. Clenching his jaws tightly, he snorted coldly. Wu Qi paid no heed to Lao Ai. Instead, he produced a supreme-grade spirit jade he brought back from Myriad Immortals' planet, from which he removed a fragment the size of a toddler's palm. Holding a tiny flying sword in his hand, Wu Qi skillfully carved a large number of ancient patterns of flowers, birds, insects, and fishes on the spirit jade. Years ago, when Lu Xiaobai was forging all kinds of ancient jade artifacts, he had studied these carvings painstakingly, and as Wu Qi had inherited his skill, he was very skilled in carving. As a result, the patterns he carved did have a unique taste. Spirit Jade Fragment. The so-called fragment meant that this piece of jade looked like a small part of a token. The patterns on it were simple and unadorned, and there were a few lines of extremely ancient primordial divine text talismans inside. These were genuine primordial divine text talismans, and anyone with a discerning eye would be able to recognize them. Amidst these patterns and runes, Wu Qi carved a small line of characters using the bird and insect seal script, which read, "Left Minister of Province, Yu Miao." Only half of the character, Miao, was carved, and a small part was missing at the edge of the jade fragment. After finishing the small jade fragment, Wu Qi's palms suddenly shot out raging fire and ice, as well as wisps of electric arcs. After fiddling with the jade fragment for a while, he carefully cast a restrictive spell on it. Because of Wu Qi's arrangement, the texture of the jade fragment was as hard as flour. With just a slight vibration, it would turn into ashes. But with the restrictive spell cast by Wu Qi, it would remain unscathed even if it was struck by a large hammer. After weighing the jade fragment in his hand, Wu Qi carefully shoved it into Lu Yi's waistband. There were a few secret pockets on his waistband, in which there were some money, jewelry, and other valuables. Wu Qi shoved the inconspicuous little jade fragment into the furthest corner of Lu Yi's waistband. Lao Ai felt his scalp go numb when he saw what Wu Qi was doing. "Are you trying to use him to frame someone?" Wu Qi smiled faintly and said in a low voice, "It might not work, just in case. Since someone wants to use us to set up a trap, then don't blame me for using their lives to frame an old fool who nearly killed me." Casually, he pointed a finger at Lu Yi's forehead, making him unable to wake up for a while. After that, Wu Qi nodded at Lao Ai and said, "You stay here and watch the show. I'll go look around. The people behind Lu Yi should be watching the commotion here as well." Lao Ai nodded. He came next to Lady Qiao's corpse and picked her up, preparing to give her a proper burial. Meanwhile, Wu Qi beckoned at a few celestial fiend puppets. Min Hua, Min Yi, and a few other disciples of Min clan with low cultivation bases flashed, transforming into phantoms and fusing into Wu Qi's body at the same time. Wu Qi glanced to the left and right, then glanced at some lofty mountains in the distance. After that, he stomped his foot, transformed into a stream of yellow mist, and plunged into the ground. On a lofty peak about 200 miles away from the slanting peak where Lord Jade and Mr. Gold were fighting desperately, the few young men Wu Qi saw during the day were frowning and watching the battle from a distance. The young captain standing in the middle growled furiously, "What is Lu Yi doing? Why did he launch the attack in such a hurry? What exactly is going on? Why have the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple started to fight desperately before the proper arrangements are made?" Wu Qi squeezed out from a crevice of a rock less than 100 feet behind them. With his back leaning against a clump of wisteria, he stood quietly and stared coldly at the group of young men. He stood under the bright moonlight in an imposing manner, as if he did not pay any attention to the few young men. One of the young men said in a low voice, "Perhaps something has happened to Reverend Sanlu? After all, we only speculated that he might be executed by Euphoria Heavenly Palace. But it is also possible that he is too timid to do such a thing. Therefore, it is possible that he has sent a message to Euphoria Heavenly Palace." Suddenly, another young man grabbed a jade talisman and put it under his ear, listening carefully. Then he said joyfully, "Don't worry, General. Lady Qiao's adoptive father, Patriarch Muji, has learned that Lady Qiao was killed, and he is coming here with his disciples. Those monks from Golden Pavilion Temple have also invited Arhat Wrath from Minor Serene Buddhist land, and they are also coming here. For the sake of the energy essence left behind by this Ganoderma immortal, I'm sure they will fight each other." The young general breathed out a sigh of relief, then said with a cold grin, "That's good. As long as both Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath are wounded, and the county will be in my hands. At that point in time, I'll be conferred a title of nobility for my meritorious service, and all of you will be rewarded." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then pointed his finger out. The spirit-restricting rope transformed into a beam of purple light and shot out, bundling all the young men up like rice dumplings. He was too lazy to find out where these young men came from, and what kind of background they had. Wu Qi thrust the sword of Greedy Wolf out and pierced through their foreheads, ripping their souls and the beast souls that were living together with them into pieces. As the young general's cultivation base was barely close to that of a heaven immortal, how could he have the strength to resist Wu Qi's sneak attack? The sword beam spun, and Wu Qi chopped off their heads. After that, a beam of white light shot out from the spirit-breeding ring, pulling their bodies into it. "Well, the heavy responsibility of slandering Yuzong will now fall on you and Lu Yi." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi raised his head and looked over at the battlefield. If he had not seen it, he would not have known, but when he did, he was really startled. In just a short period of time, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had fled with their bodies bathed in blood, and one of the 3 heaven immortal old monks from Golden Pavilion Temple had fallen. Meanwhile, the rest of the cultivators were engaged in a chaotic fight, crazily fighting for the Ganoderma. Seeing that Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had fled tens of miles away, Wu Qi dared not to waste any more time. Hastily, he changed his visage and plunged into the ground. Chapter 436. 2 strong beams of light, one gold and one green, were fleeing hastily in midair. Covered in blood, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold felt like weeping but had no tears. "It's all your fault." While fleeing, they kept cursing each other with the most vicious words. Their faces were filled with resentment. The fact that Lady Qiao was killed by the Golden Pavilion Temple was a heart-wrenching pain to them. They felt that it was all the fault of the other party. If it was not for the fact that the other party made a mistake and failed to protect Lady Qiao, how could a beautiful lady like her be killed by a bunch of bald donkeys? On the contrary, they were not very interested in the energy essence left behind by the Ganoderma immortal. Lord Jade and Mr. Gold were the typical foppish young masters. After painstakingly cultivating until they became 33rd tier heaven immortals, they had put all their interests into pursuing women and indulging in extravagant pleasures. That was the reason why they were always following Lady Qiao, and became the 2 most famous gigolos among her countless gigolos. Today, when Lady Qiao was killed, both of them felt as if a piece of their heart was dug out by someone, and it brought them extreme heartache. Filled with rage, they attacked the monks from Golden Pavilion Temple at the same time. But little did they expect that the defense of the monks was extremely ridiculous. Even when they joined forces, they still could not break through the impenetrable defense of the monks. While they were fighting desperately, those cultivators who were trying to take advantage of the situation outside suddenly appeared. 5 heaven immortals, several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators, and several hundred nascent soul and Jindan cultivators attacked at the same time. Moreover, they happened to strike at the moment when the battle between them and the monks was the fiercest, when both sides were greatly weakened. Although both of them managed to flee with severe injuries, one of the monks from Golden Pavilion Temple was killed on the spot due to carelessness. "It's all your fault." Both of them cursed again. They had been Lady Qiao's gigolos for a long time, and their friendship was not shallow. Therefore, they knew quite a lot about each other's dirty deeds. Now that they had lost Lady Qiao, the lubricant, they shed all pretenses of cordiality and cursed each other, which was very unpleasant to the ears. At least, Wu Qi, who had sneaked ahead of them using innate earth element escape art, could not bear to hear their curses. 7 celestial fiend puppets transformed into huge, 90 feet tall, bronze-colored celestial fiend gods and soared into the sky, emanating a very strong fiend aura as they leaped towards the 2 men. These celestial fiend puppets cultivated the celestial fiend battle the heaven script, which was a body-tempering cultivation technique from the Fiend League. They were best at close combat, and basically, they could be used as humanoid magical treasures. The 7-headed demon god teleported beside the 2 of them, and 14 fists rained down on them like a storm. Each of his punches contained a very strong devil energy, filled with devouring power, corrosive power, and all kinds of negative energies. They smashed heavily on Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, who were caught unprepared, and knocked them back. A large sheet of golden light burst out from Chi-Chi's body. Both of them were quite famous for their wealth in the vicinity of Anhe City, and each of them had 3 to 4 defensive immortal items. Although they were caught off guard by the sudden attack of the celestial fiend puppets, their immortal items had automatically protected them from the attack, barely managing to block the attack for them. However, these 2 men had been living like princes for several hundreds of thousands of years, and it had been a long time since they fought with anyone. As a result, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had long forgotten how to fight. When they were attacked by the celestial fiend puppets, they had to rely on the automatic protection of their immortal items to avoid death. Therefore, they were not thinking about how to deal with the enemies, but Chi-Chi, who was acting like a master, cried out at the top of his lungs, "How dare you? Little brat, do you know who we are?" Wu Qi sprung out from under the ground. He was too lazy to care about who these 2 men were. After giving them a glance, Wu Qi slapped the top of his head. A plume of gray smoke shot up into the sky amidst jarring ghost howls. Amidst the smoke, the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag slowly revealed its true form. It was impossible for the other immortal items Wu Qi had to break their defense in a short period of time. The Dark Hasik did possess a frighteningly powerful power, but it did not listen to Wu Qi's command. Therefore, the only thing he could borrow now was the power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. Wu Qi took out the soul-searching flag and gripped its handle with his right hand. Clenching his teeth, he sprayed a mouthful of blood essence onto the flag, raised it up high, and waved it forcefully. A series of strange whistling noises rang out, as the glow on Lord Jade and Mr. Gold's bodies dimmed abruptly. Their eyes went blank, and their eyeballs began to spin wildly. They had lost their senses because of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. 7 celestial fiend puppets sprung into the air, throwing 14 fists and smashing them around, causing the glow on their immortal items to dim. After that, they grabbed their heads and twisted their necks. 2 mighty 33rd tier heaven immortals, whose overall strength was slightly stronger than Wu Qi even though they were severely wounded, were killed by Wu Qi as easily as slaughtering chickens. What a great treasure! Thanks to you today. Wu Qi happily stroked the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, and had a higher opinion of the power of this immortal item. It was a pity that the item spirit of the flag was still in a deep slumber, recovering. Otherwise, he would be able to find out what grade of immortal item it was. A stream of divine flame of order sprayed out and burned into Lord Jade and Mr. Gold's 7 orifices. In just a blink of an eye, both of them were turned into a large pile of blood and soul crystals. Right at this moment, a series of bird cries rang out, as over 30 strange beams rushed out from their bodies, trying to flee in all directions. Wu Qi snorted coldly. He pointed his finger out, and a faintly discernible strand of innate aura rushed out. All of a sudden, the over 30 beams, which had fled several thousand feet away, stopped abruptly and flew back quickly, wheeling around Wu Qi for a while to sense the faintly discernible innate aura. After that, they cautiously approached Wu Qi. Wu Qi nodded his head and said in a low voice, "Submit to me wholeheartedly, and in the future, all of you will have the chance to break away from the item spirit and reforge your fleshly body." The over 30 beams let out joyful cries as they flew into Wu Qi's body, then obediently opened up the core of their item spirit, allowing Wu Qi to leave his divine will mark in their souls. For these middle and lower grade immortal items, the attraction of innate aura was simply too strong. On the other hand, Wu Qi was a little worried. When he sensed so many weapons on his forehead, including blades, spears, swords, halberds, axes, and spears, he could not help but sigh inwardly. How was he going to handle so many immortal items? Left with no other choice, Wu Qi could only send a clear divine will to them. Wu Qi would also transfer them to other people, but as long as they were obedient and devoted to the task of a qualified immortal item, Wu Qi would reward them with a part of innate aura from time to time. Do you know how precious innate aura is? If you do not contribute anything, why should I give you such a great benefit? These were the exact words Wu Qi used to deceive these immortal items. The item spirits were sensible, and one after another, they agreed to Wu Qi's condition. Only then did Wu Qi breathe out a sigh of relief. Although his current overall strength was strong enough to fight against a heaven immortal, if over 30 immortal items were to revolt, even a formidable immortal like Heavenly Lord Sanyu would have a headache, let alone Wu Qi. After dealing with Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, and subduing over 30 immortal items, Wu Qi put away all the blood and soul crystals, then quickly plunged into the ground and rushed back to the battlefield. Lao Ai brought Madman Shui, Hidden Heart, and the unconscious Lu Yi, hiding in a far distance and watching the battle. After Wu Qi reunited with Lao Ai did not ask him where he had gone and what he had done. Instead, he told him directly, "That old monk and that old fellow look very strong." During the period of time when Wu Qi was pursuing and killing Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, a great change had taken place near the battlefield. The cultivators who attacked Lord Jade, Mr. Gold, and the monk from Golden Pavilion Temple, as well as the cultivators who fought for the Ganoderma immortal's body, were all killed. Now, there was only a skinny old man, who stood about 3 feet tall and had a gloomy expression on his face, and a fat monk, who was tall and burly, and had an angry expression on his face. After communicating with Lao Ai through divine sense, Wu Qi finally learned what had happened during this period of time. The skinny old man was Patriarch Muji, and the fat monk was Arhat Wrath. Nominally, Patriarch Muji was Lady Qiao's adoptive father, but in fact, Lady Qiao was his direct disciple, his lover, and also the agent he used to travel across the surrounding areas of Anhe City. On the other hand, Arhat Wrath was his master in the minor serene Buddhist land, and the abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple was his disciple who listened to the scripture. Both of them possessed the cultivation base of 24th tier heaven immortals, and they were the representatives of various immortal sects who invaded Anhe City. Over the years, they had only manipulated some superpowers to fight against each other, but both of them cherished their feathers, and had never struck out easily. But this time, when the essence of the Ganoderma immortal was right in front of them, no matter how much they cherished their feathers, they had no choice but to fight each other. As soon as they appeared, they killed the cultivators who came to take advantage of the commotion. Patriarch Muji specifically killed the heaven immortals and cultivators from the righteous sects, while Arhat Wrath was merciless to the cultivators from the evil sections. Working together, in just a few breaths of time, they had killed all the cultivators who dared to stick their heads out within a radius of 30 miles, leaving only a few cultivators from Euphoria Heavenly Palace and monks from Golden Pavilion Temple behind. Before Wu Qi came back, both of them just stared at each other blankly, not saying a word. When Wu Qi came next to Lao AI and intentionally unleashed a tiny bit of his aura, both of them turned to look at Wu Qi. After that, Patriarch Muji suddenly said, "Bald donkey, if you take a step back today, I'll definitely reward you handsomely in the future. We've killed so many people just now, and there are many juniors watching us. Are we really going to fight each other and let them watch the fun?" Arhat Rath chuckled, nodded his fat head, and said seriously, "This item is fated with the Buddhist League, so I can't let you take it away. Patriarch Muji, if you take a step back today and form a good relationship with the Buddhist League, I'll spare your life 3 times in the future." Patriarch Muji snorted coldly, then pointed his finger at Arhat Rath and said with a cold grin, "If that's the case, let's see who's stronger with our fists. Bald donkey, you're already dead." As soon as the words left his mouth, dark, stinking sweat suddenly oozed out from under Arhat Rath's skin. His body shriveled abruptly, and the relic lotus throne above his head began to wither as well. All of a sudden, the signs of the decay of the Deva appeared on his body. Arhat Rath was startled, and he cried out in a deep voice, "The Dharma of Buddhism is boundless. How can an evil fiend withstand a single strike from me?" A golden light radiated from his body, and Arhat Rath's body quickly returned to its original state. On the other hand, Patriarch Muji's body began to expand abruptly. His once dark skin gradually took on a faint golden hue, making him look like a statue crafted from pure gold. A ring of Buddhist light was even seen emerging from the top of his head. Patriarch Muji cried out in shock, then breathed out a long sigh and said, "The righteous cannot suppress the evil. In the end, the Buddha will become the evil." After that, Patriarch Muji transformed into a beam of dark light and sped towards Arhat Rath. Arhat Rath's face turned solemn. He opened his mouth and let the beam of dark light rush into his mouth. A few old monks from Golden Pavilion Temple sat cross-legged next to Arhat Rath, reciting the subduing evil scripture in unison. Suddenly, a dark mist sprayed out from all over Arhat Rath's body, and the left side of his body abruptly turned into a skeleton. Wu Qi gasped. These 2 old monks had really risked their lives. Chapter 437. Arhat Rath was seen sitting cross-legged high up in the sky. Every now and then, a part of his body would collapse, exposing his white bones. However, in the blink of an eye, that part would be shrouded in a Buddhist light, and his flesh would quickly grow back. This happened over and over again. Parts of his body kept collapsing and rotting, only to be reborn amidst the Buddhist light. Grand and majestic chanting and shrill evil howls kept coming out from within Arhat Rath's body. When both of them mixed together, it made those who heard them feel as if a saw blade was spinning in their heads, making them feel extremely uncomfortable. Apart from the 5 heaven immortals who were killed by Arhat Rath and Patriarch Muji at the beginning, and those cultivators who came with them, more and more immortal sects and powers around Anhi City had arrived after receiving the news. However, when they saw the bizarre Arhat Rath from afar, just like Wu Qi and the other cultivators, these people who came later just watched from a distance of several tens of miles away. None of them dared to come close. Some cultivators with profound cultivation bases and extensive knowledge were explaining the mysteries of this place to their disciples in low voices. The strange appearance of Arhat Rath did not look like a fight between ordinary immortals and cultivators, who would unleash a myriad of thunderbolts, flame, boundless sword beams, magical clouds, and dazzling lights. But in fact, a fight like this was not dangerous at all. Unless they were like Wu Qi, who had a powerful immortal item like the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, which could deliver a deadly strike to the enemy, killing them without giving them a chance to fight back. In a fight between heaven immortals like this, if they were not extremely unlucky, they would only suffer some injuries to their limbs, and would still be able to escape with their lives intact. As long as they returned to their cave abodes and recuperated for several tens of thousands of years, they would be back to being alive and kicking. After all, be it a fight of magical powers or flying swords or magical treasures, it was not easy for both sides to deliver a deadly strike to each other when they were fighting from a distance of several tens of hundreds of miles, and both of them were protected by immortal items of similar strength. Since they had all cultivated to the realm of heaven immortals, unless they were some prodigal sons like Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, which heaven immortal would not flee for their lives like a frightened rabbit once they were injured. Therefore, the more exciting the fight between heaven immortals was, the less risky it would be. On the contrary, although the fight between Patriarch Muji and Arhat Rath seemed to be silent, they were actually fighting with their lives on the line. Patriarch Muji had his body turned into a fiend, transforming into a beam of fiend light that shot into Arhat Rath's body. Arhat Rath simply opened his mouth wide and let Patriarch Muji fuse into his body. This was the two of them staking everything on one throw. They gave up on the pointless battle of magic and magical treasures, and directly used their lives to cultivate their last breath of vitality to fight. Using a mystic technique of the Buddhist League, Arhat Rath had transformed himself into a minor kiliacosm, using it to perform the endless transformations of the ancient times. He wanted to trap and kill Patriarch Muji in one fell swoop. On the other hand, the Patriarch was destroying all kinds of rules in the minor kiliacosm, using the divine ability of the Fiend League to give birth to endless sinful murderous aura, trying his best to destroy the world and plunge Arhat Rath into eternal damnation. A few old monks from Golden Pavilion Temple were standing around Arhat Rath and reciting some scriptures, which could clear up Arhat Rath's mind and increase his divine power to compete with Patriarch Muji. However, Patriarch Muji was trapped inside Arhat Rath's body, and the cultivation technique of the Fiend League was famous for its domineering power, danger, and ruthlessness. Therefore, he was able to gain the upper hand. The two of them were equally matched in this manner. Gradually, a few more celestial immortals rushed over. These few new heaven immortals were not from the various powers around Enhi City, but the immortals recruited by those immortal sects who had shops in Enhi City. These heaven immortals did not know about the mighty reputation of Patriarch Muji and Arhat Rath, and they were itching to make a move, hoping to take advantage of the situation. Right at this moment, a white cloud drifted over from afar. A burly old monk clad in a golden kasaya and holding a Vajra staff in his hand flew over, together with tens of young monks. The old monk cried out from afar, "Fellow immortals, this item is fated with the Buddhist League. I hope fellow Taoists can sit here and watch. We, the Golden Pavilion Temple, will definitely repay the kindness you've shown us today in the future." Wu Qi was struck by a thought. He should be the abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple, right? Arhat Rath spent most of his time in secluded cultivation in minor serene Buddhist land. This abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple, commonly known as Grandmaster Tiger Roar, was the representative of the Buddhist League around Enhi City. He had a cultivation base of 30th tier heaven immortal, and was an expert in all kinds of evil subduing techniques of the Buddhist League. He was a ferocious monk who wholeheartedly focused on killing to save the world. A few cold laughs rang out as the three heaven immortals who had just arrived approached Grandmaster Tiger Roar. They laughed together and said, "Fated with the Buddhist League." I'm tired of hearing this phrase over the years. Let's see if we are fated to meet again in terms of magic power. Among these three heaven immortals, two of them had a cultivation base of 31st tier, and the last one had a cultivation base of 32nd tier. Although there was a gap between their cultivation base and Grandmaster Tiger Roar's, the gap was not too big. Of course, they were not familiar with each other, nor did they have any friendship with each other. The reason why they approached Grandmaster Tiger Roar at the same time was that they wanted to join forces to deal with the strongest one first, and then settle the score among themselves. With a worried expression, Grandmaster Tiger Roar gave Arhat Rath a look, whose lower body had turned into green bones, and his upper body was shrouded in a Buddhist aura. Then, he quickly gave the huge Ganoderma underneath the slanting peak a glance. When he saw the hazy, white Ganoderma horse hiding in the depths of the Ganoderma, his eyes lit up abruptly. A strong gleam burst out from his eyes, making him look like a greedy wild wolf who had just seen a piece of fresh, bloody meat. Excellent, excellent. Since you three fellow immortals refuse to come to your senses, let me show you a shortcut to liberation. From a distance, Grandmaster Tiger Roar threw out the Vajra scepter in his hand, transforming it into a three-headed Wisdom King, who stood 100 feet tall and sat cross-legged on top of his head. Underneath Wisdom King was a red lotus throne, from which he unleashed a 1,000 feet long red lotus karmic flame that coiled around Grandmaster Tiger Roar's body. Grandmaster Tiger Roar gave a loud roar as he casually tore off his kasaya, revealing a vivid tattoo of a tiger descending the mountain on his chest. Following Grandmaster Tiger Roar's roar, beams of golden light shone from the tattoo of the tiger. Not long after that, a gigantic tiger, about 70 to 80 feet long, dashed out from Grandmaster Tiger Roar's chest, roaring and wheeling around him. Its several tens of feet long tail whipped the air and produced ear-piercing noises. The three heaven immortals' faces flickered, and they struck at the same time. One of them drew his sword and thrust it straight towards Grandmaster Tiger Roar's chest, leaving a 1-mile-long, three-colored beam in the air. Another raised an umbrella and unleashed a large sheet of bright light to protect the three of them. The last one clenched both fists, with lightning flashing vaguely in his palms and ringing out clear and melodious thunderclaps from time to time. Although it was the first time the three of them worked together, by relying on the telepathic connection between heaven immortals, they were able to understand each other's cultivation techniques, allowing them to come up with a very ingenious cooperation. This was especially true for the heaven immortal who held the umbrella. His umbrella shot out a beam of white light, and a beautiful girl with a slender, naked body appeared, singing and dancing amidst the white light. Accompanied by the melodious singing, a great amount of water vapor kept rushing into the umbrella, condensing into countless crystal-clear snowflakes on its surface. Hexagonal snowflakes piled up and overlapped with each other, transforming into a thick ice shield that emanated a strong cold air around the three heaven immortals. Grandmaster Tiger Roar gave a cold snort and shook his head disdainfully. Sitting cross-legged on top of his head, Ming Wang waved his hand and slashed the demon-subduing sword in his hand at the approaching sword beam, knocking it several tens of miles away with ease. The ferocious tiger, who was running at top speed next to him, gave a loud roar, and with a blink of its body, it pounced towards the three heaven immortals. With a blink of its body, it came right next to the three heaven immortals as if it had teleported, slapping its paw forcefully on the ice shield. It looked like a single paw, but in Wu Qi's eyes, the tiger had slashed out at least several tens of thousands of times in just a split second. Furthermore, the power of those tens of thousands of paws had interwove with each other and finally turned into a single paw. It was a tremendous force that came from several tens of thousands of paws in a row. It was a miraculous technique that shocked even Wu Qi. He reckoned that even the current celestial fiend puppets would not be able to escape unscathed if they were slapped by this tiger. In fact, it was just as Wu Qi had expected. The tiger was also an excellent Buddhist item that Golden Pavilion Temple had refined day and night under the influence of the Buddhist energy. Later on, it was fused with the soul of a white tiger, and that was how it came into being. The ice shield was shattered by the paw, and the girl who was dancing and singing amidst the white light gave a moan. Suddenly, a few wisps of cold air sprayed out from her little mouth. Obviously, the attack had damaged her foundation. The three heaven immortals dodged hastily, but there was no time for them to do so. The tiger's paw slapped on their bodies and broke their bones and tendons, sending them flying backward at the same time. They cried out in pain at the same time, and no longer dared to attack Grandmaster Tiger Roar again. Instead, they simply spun and fled. However, before they could flee, Wu Qi had already activated the formation he had set up underground beforehand. With the help of the blind old man Spirit Tea, 90% of the injuries on Wu Qi's body had healed, and his overall strength had improved to a new level. He pressed both palms on the ground, unleashing all the innate earth energies from his body and quickly communicating with the vicious formation underground, which only allowed people to enter but not exit. Fearing that the power of the formation was not strong enough, Wu Qi even mobilized the power of the acquired Earth Spirit Pearl, fusing the vast and boundless Earth energies into his own energy, then unleashed it at the same time. Magnetic Grand Magic. Wu Qi gave a deep snort. Suddenly, all the mountains within 100 miles of him trembled and collapsed at the same time, lying flat on the ground. The enormous amount of Earth energies under the ground was quickly transformed into magnetic forces. A dark glow enveloped the entire ground, while the gravitational force in the surroundings suddenly expanded. In just a blink of an eye, it had increased by over 1,000 times. Whether it was Arhat Wrath, Grandmaster Tiger Roar, the 3 heaven immortals who were fleeing at top speed, or all the cultivators who were watching from several tens of miles away, none of them had expected such an unforeseen event. Their bodies suddenly sank, and they were sucked down to the ground in a sorry state. Amidst a series of cracking noises, the ground kept sinking, and in just a blink of an eye, it had sunk several tens of miles deep. Then, a loud boom rang out as the formation exploded. An enormous amount of underground fire energies surged out, sweeping across the surroundings with poisonous flames of the earth and enveloping all the people who were sucked into the ground. All cultivators below the realm of Heaven Immortal were instantly turned into ashes. Wu Qi waved his hand casually, causing the corpses of the few young men to fly out from the spirit-breeding ring. Then he cast out a few runes from the Tao of Ghost and Deity, covering these corpses with a faint layer of ghost energy. After that, he unleashed a few thunderbolts and charred all of them. Grabbing the unconscious Lu Yi, Wu Qi threw him next to the corpses of the few young men. After that, he kicked Lu Yi's forehead, shattering his brain like a piece of tofu. A stream of earth energies hit Lu Yi's palm, leaving behind a very strong aura of earth energies. After that, Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice, pulling Lao Ai and the others with him as he spun and fled. In just a blink of an eye, they had vanished without a trace using the escape art of Earth. After a full hour, 2 wild roars were heard coming from the depths of the mountains. Damn it! Left Minister of Zhong Province, Yu Miao. Good, very good. When Wu Qi heard the roars, he lightly flicked his finger, activating the restrictive spell on the jade slip. A thunderclap rang out, and the jade slip exploded into pieces. With a cold grin on his face, Wu Qi thought to himself, I suppose there must be some mighty figure behind Arhat Wrath and Patriarch Muji. Yu Miao, oh Yu Miao, I really want to see what you look like now. Chapter 438. In the depth of the mountain, the slanting peak where the Ganoderma immortals' remains once stood had completely sunk into the ground, leaving behind a huge pit that measured nearly 100 miles in diameter and was over 100 miles deep. Vaguely, a red light was seen bursting out from the depths of the pit. A great amount of lava shot whistling up into the sky, leaving a scorching trail in the air before slowly falling back down. Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath hovered above the magma like 2 defeated roosters, staring at each other with their jaws tightly clenched. Both men were clenching their jaws so tightly that they produced cracking noises. Half of Patriarch Muji's body was glinting with a golden gleam, as if it was forged from pure gold. A faint shadow of a reclining Buddha could be seen hovering on top of it, while a very strong Buddhist aura kept rushing out from it. Arhat Wrath's lower abdomen had turned into a pile of white bones, and there was a faint green mist lingering on his bones, emanating a brutal evil aura that made one shudder. Apart from the 2 of them and Grandmaster Tiger Roar, who was hovering off to the side, there were no other cultivators around them. Wu Qi's desperate plan was too powerful. The underground energy veins had cracked, and the energies from a few of them had exploded in an instant. Apart from Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath, all the cultivators present were burned to ashes by the lava. Even the few heaven immortals who were present could only survive the first wave of the underground flame, before they were turned into nothingness by the frightening heat waves that came after. All the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace, Golden Pavilion Temple, and the various immortal sects around Anhi City who came here were all wiped out, leaving only the 2 of them alone, staring at each other viciously like 2 fighting cocks. On the other hand, Grandmaster Tiger Roar had all his meridians broken, and his spine broken into 70 to 80 pieces. He was just one breath away from death, and could be considered as a dead man. A huge crystallized Ganoderma rested neatly on a white cloud between them, emitting an alluring purple glow. Patriarch Muji suddenly coughed violently, coughing out mouthful after mouthful of blood. The blood he coughed out was translucent like a seven-colored glass, and was emitting a faint fragrance of sandalwood. Upon seeing Patriarch Muji's miserable appearance, Arhat Rath suddenly roared with laughter. But after a few laughs, a large amount of sticky, pitch-black, foul-smelling blood gushed out from his mouth. Both men were fighting each other with the power of Source, and Patriarch Muji was trapped inside Arhat Rath's body. While both men were having a great time fighting, Wu Qi triggered the spies who were lying in ambush, dragging both men into the frightening heat wave produced by the eruption of the underground energy veins. Arhat Rath was troubled by Patriarch Muji on the inside, and he was threatened by the eruption of the energy veins on the outside. With both factors added together, he was immediately severely wounded. Left with no other choice, Arhat Rath gave up a part of his blood essence and released Patriarch Muji from his body. Taking advantage of the critical moment when Arhat Rath's suppressive force was suddenly weakened, Patriarch Muji unleashed a full-force attack with a vicious evil technique, nearly disintegrating Arhat Rath's fleshly body. The evil energy contaminated Arhat Rath's body, nearly contaminating his relic and forcibly draining the magical power that he had cultivated painstakingly for a few periods. But Arhat Rath did not let Patriarch Muji have an easy time. When Grandmaster Tiger Roar saw Arhat Rath was in a crisis, he immediately risked his life to save him, unleashing a desperate attack with all his cultivation base and energy essence. Together with Arhat Rath's counterattack, they gave Patriarch Muji a severe blow. Patriarch Muji had just severely wounded Arhat Rath and rushed out from his body. Right when he was feeling complacent, he was dragged into the frightening energy torrent produced by the eruption of the underground energy veins. After that, Arhat Rath and Grandmaster Tiger Roar joined forces to attack him. His body was invaded by the Buddhist energy, and half of his body was forcibly turned golden by the Buddhist energy. Patriarch Muji was a ferocious man by nature. Although he was severely wounded, he did not forget to use his second Celestial Fiend clone to severely injure Grandmaster Tiger Roar. As a result, he ended up in the current situation. Grandmaster Tiger Roar had completely lost his ability to fight, while Patriarch Muji and Arhat Rath could barely maintain their cultivation base of 33rd tier Heaven Immortals. However, their energy essence was depleting rapidly. If they were to fight again, perhaps both of them would lose their lives here. Laughing dryly, Patriarch Muji pointed at the remains of the Ganoderma Immortal and said, "We've been tricked by Yu Miao. They want to take back the control of this county. Hee, we can't fight anymore, or else we'll all be in big trouble. How about we split it equally?" Arhat Rath gave a touch of spirit jade powder in his palm, clenched his jaws and said, "Yu Miao, the left minister of Zhong province. Hee, someone will find him to settle the score. I've already informed my master about what happened here. I won't let it go just like that." Wiping off the dark blood from the corner of his mouth, Arhat Rath said in a deep voice, "So be it. You and I swear that the things inside must be distributed fairly, and no one can take advantage of them. I'm going to offer this rare treasure to my master. Don't you dare have any other ideas." Patriarch Muji glared at Arhat Rath, then grinned coldly and said, "You're acting like you're the only one who has a master? My ancestral master will also like this kind of filial piety. Let's make a vow to divide it equally. Whoever dares to take advantage of them will have their children and grandchildren become nuns and monks for generations to come. None of them will have an asshole, and the yin and yang will be reversed. All of them will give birth to a bunch of fucking freaks." Patriarch Muji's vow was vicious, and it made Arhat Rath's face twitch. He was too lazy to argue with this old monster from the Evil League, so he simply swore the vow. After all, he was a cultivator from the Buddhist League, and he would not have any descendants. Therefore, this messy vow would not bring him any harm. After making the vow, both men immediately came next to the crystallized Ganoderma. Very carefully, Arhat-Rath pulled out a crescent-shaped blade about the size of a palm, then said complacently, "This is the blade that my master used to shave my head for the first time 300 reincarnations ago. After being infused with my Buddhist power for 300 reincarnations, this blade is no weaker than an ordinary middle-grade immortal item. It's just the perfect weapon to cut this thing open." Patriarch Muji snorted mockingly, twitching his lips and not wanting to talk to Arhat-Rath anymore. Reverently, he raised the blade up high and recited a few incantations in a low voice. Vaguely, a golden gleam shone from his body, slowly seeping into the blade. Immediately, the tiny blade emitted a blinding light that looked like a bright moon, dispersing the thick smoke and raging flames in the surroundings and illuminating the area 100 miles around them. Holding the blade lightly, he swung it downward. It truly deserved to be the item that Arhat-Rath had carried with him for 300 reincarnations, as it possessed an unfathomable magical power. The remains of the Ganoderma immortal, which no ordinary immortal item could cut open, were easily cut open by the blade. A fragrant aroma wafted out from the remains of the Ganoderma immortal. Patriarch Muji and Arhat-Rath's eyes shone brightly, while Chi-Chi took a deep breath. They felt that the fragrance flowed through their 7 apertures, connecting their bones and meridians. It was as if there was a mercury-like stream of air flowing through their meridians. In the blink of an eye, they felt refreshed all over, and every pore was releasing a faint fragrance. The remains of the Ganoderma immortal truly deserve its reputation. The two of them took in deep breaths and felt warm all over. The wounds on their bodies no longer hurt, and they felt like they were floating in the air, as if they were going to dance in the air. Many illusions appeared in front of them, and they were all the strangeness of the Supreme Devil Realm or the solemn chi of the Supreme Pure Land that they usually saw when they were meditating. A muffled boom rang out, as the ball of liquid hovering in front of them suddenly exploded. The sticky liquid sprayed out and sprinkled all over their bodies. The sticky liquid was extremely poisonous. When it touched their bodies, it immediately squeezed into their bodies through their pores, bringing with it a strong aroma as it began to corrode their flesh and blood energy essence. What made Patriarch Muji and Arhat-Rath panic was that the liquid had a very strong corrosive force to their fleshly bodies. Even their fiend bodies and dharma bodies could not withstand the invasion. On top of that, they had no idea where the aroma came from. Although it could not knock them unconscious, it had greatly hindered the flow of their fiend energy and Buddhist energy. They were already badly wounded and had less than 10% of their cultivation base left. Now, with the liquid entering their bodies and the strange fragrance suppressing their cultivation base, large amounts of white sticky bubbles kept rising from their bodies. Their muscles were rotting piece by piece, turning into a bone-chilling poisonous liquid. Deadly poison! Arhat-Rath bellowed furiously. Shape-shifting in water. Obviously, Patriarch Muji had a very deep understanding of all the poisonous things under the heaven. He cried out sternly, "Even the body of a gold immortal cannot withstand the corrosive substance of extreme Yin. Quickly dive into the lava and disperse the Yin water with the heat from the earth's core. Otherwise, we will lose our immortal bodies." Furiously, Patriarch Muji reached out his hand and grabbed towards the white Ganoderma horse. Arhat-Rath watched helplessly as Patriarch Muji grabbed the horse, and did not stop him. Patriarch Muji grabbed the Ganoderma horse, then squeezed it hard. A cracking noise rang out as the Ganoderma horse broke into countless white and tender pieces. "Fuck him!" Patriarch Muji and Arhat-Rath cursed furiously at the same time. "Yuzong, how dare you humiliate us? Radish, how could you disguise yourself as a Ganoderma horse? Bastard! So what if you used a useless Ganoderma horse? Radish, how dare you humiliate us with a radish?" Patriarch Muji and Arhat-Rath were so angry that their eyelids were twitching. They roared furiously and plunged into the lava that kept bursting out from underneath, sinking down with great difficulty. The underground fire element energy was very abundant. Both of them had to work hard to absorb the underground fire and disperse the shape-shifting Yin water that was recklessly corroding their bodies. The shape-shifting Yin water was extremely vicious, and there was no way they could get rid of it in a short period of time. When Grandmaster Tiger Roar saw Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath being tricked, he coughed out a mouthful of blood because of extreme anger. Merciful Buddha, the branch of Golden Pavilion Temple has fallen today. Laughing bitterly, Grandmaster Tiger Roar said in a low voice, I'll be reincarnated right now. I only hope that in my next life, I can still attain enlightenment and enter the peaceful land of Buddha again. A beam of rainbow light shot out from between his brows, wrapping around a nearly shattered relic as it slowly squeezed out from his body. His fleshly body was shattered, and the relic was severely damaged. Therefore, Grandmaster Tiger Roar could only use what little remained of his cultivation base to protect a thread of his true spirit and reincarnate. With his foundation in this life, it would not take him many years to become an Arhat again in his next life. But suddenly, a bronze arm stretched out from beside Grandmaster Tiger Roar. A celestial fiend puppet darted out from beside Grandmaster Tiger Roar and grabbed the relic. Laughing ferociously, a clump of pitch-black and sticky fiend flame sprayed out. In just a blink of an eye, the puppet had refined Grandmaster Tiger Roar's relic, turning it into a powerful and pure force that fused into the puppet's body. Wu Qi's voice was heard coming out from the puppet's body. It was as light as a feather, like the whisper of a ghost. Excellent. The area 1,000,000 miles around in He City is now a vacuum. It's the perfect time for me to show my strength. Chapter 439. 7 days later, Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath finally crawled out from the magma with their severely wounded bodies. The underground energy veins on Pangu continent were extremely stable and strong. Although they were destroyed by Wu Qi, they soon began to adjust and recover themselves. In just 7 days, the collapsed crater had gradually recovered and was about to level with the surrounding ground. The underground energy veins had also returned to their original path, and the magma that surged and surged under the ground had gradually solidified, forming a new rock stratum. With great difficulty, Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath, whose overall strength had dropped to the same level as a nascent soul cultivator, crawled out from the ground. They looked at each other with tears in their eyes, yet neither of them could shed any tears. Both men's skin and flesh were completely corroded by the shape-shifting in water, leaving behind only 2 skeletons. Patriarch Muji's skeleton was pitch black, while Arhat Wrath's was pure silver with a hint of pale golden color. You meow. Patriarch Muji snorted coldly. You meow. Arhat Wrath threw his head back and roared furiously. After that, a thunderbolt suddenly exploded on the back of Arhat Wrath's head, causing him to stagger and stumble a dozen steps forward in a sorry state. Luckily, he did not fall to the ground. Before Arhat Wrath could come to his senses, another several dozens of thunderbolts came smashing down at him, making him howl furiously. But how could he have the strength to struggle? Not only the thunderbolts, a dozen pinkish sword beams were hacking and slashing at him in a messy manner, causing sparks and sparks to fly all over Arhat Wrath's body. Yet, none of them could leave even a scratch on him. However, the sword beams came with a very strong force, causing Arhat Wrath's skeleton to sway and sway in all directions. All of a sudden, he fell to the ground, rolling and rolling on the ground as the sword beams struck him, and could no longer stand on his feet. Patriarch Muji was taken aback, and hastily took a big step back. He and Arhat Wrath were severely wounded at the moment, without any strength left in their bodies. Their skin and flesh were corroded by the shape-shifting in water, and they were at their weakest. How could Patriarch Muji not panic when a nascent divinity cultivator could threaten their lives? The celestial fiend puppet, who had transformed into Reverend Sanlu, roared and roared as he brought Wu Qi, Lao Ai, and the rest of the people. Thunderbolts and sword beams crackled and rattled as they attacked Arhat Wrath. Patriarch, please help us kill this bald donkey. Reverend Sanlu roared at the top of his voice. 7 days ago, it was this disciple who got lucky and killed that bald donkey abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple. Patriarch Muji was struck with wild joy when he saw Reverend Sanlu bringing a few cultivators from Euphoria Heavenly Palace and some members of Min clan. Then he cried out, "My grandchildren, you have done well." Ji's Dao Patriarch Muji Heaven Earth Dao Sect Star Sect Ling King Tian. Laughing wildly, Patriarch Muji spread his pitch-black skeleton, curled his body and leaped towards Arhat Wrath. The finger bones stabbed forcefully into Arhat Wrath's skull, producing a large amount of sparks. Arhat Wrath, the willpower you've accumulated through 300 reincarnations is going to benefit me. Patriarch Muji cried out sternly. Arhat Wrath, the willpower you've accumulated through 300 reincarnations is going to benefit me. With your Buddhist energy essence, I'll be able to expel the fiends and safely transcend the saint and fiend immortal tribulation in the future. Hee. With the help of your Buddhist energy essence, this minor injury of mine will be nothing. Give it to me now. Arhat Wrath roared furiously. He struggled and tried to resist, but Wu Qi and his company had already rushed over, unleashing a flurry of attacks on him. At this moment, there was not even a tiny bit of Buddhist energy left in his body, and he did not even have the strength to control his prime Buddhist treasures. His fleshly body had turned into a skeleton once again, and the invincible golden body of the Buddhist League had turned into nothing. He had lost the last chance to save his own life. On top of that, Patriarch Muji, whose cultivation base was not any weaker than him, could only struggle for 15 minutes. Eventually, Patriarch Muji crushed his skull with a finger, then pulled out a fist-sized relic shimmering with a bright silver gleam, which Arhat Wrath had cultivated through 300 reincarnations. Wu Qi smashed the relic with a thunderbolt, destroying the last thread of Arhat Wrath's soul. Patriarch Muji opened his mouth greedily, and the relic transformed into a stream of light and rushed into his body, coating his skeleton with a thick layer of silver light. The Buddhist energy essence of a Buddhist cultivator was very beneficial to a cultivator from the Evil League. By devouring an eminent Buddhist monk, it could save a cultivator from several hundred years of laborious cultivation. After Patriarch Muji devoured Arhat Wrath's relic, it was tantamount to him having his cultivation base doubled out of nowhere. As long as he exercised the evil technique and gradually refined the enormous energy essence in the relic, he might be able to improve his cultivation base by a few tiers. On top of that, the Buddhist energy essence was an expert in repelling all kinds of fiends. With that, when Patriarch Muji was cultivating in the future, the most troublesome inner demons of fiend immortals would no longer be able to stop him. With that, he would be able to improve his realm and cultivation base at an incredible speed. The cultivation techniques of the Evil League were the fastest. As long as there were no inner demons, no immortal could improve his cultivation base faster than a fiend immortal. After devouring all the cultivation base of Arhat Wrath, who was also a 24th tier heaven immortal, Patriarch Muji did have a great chance to become a gold immortal in the future. Perhaps he could transcend the heavenly tribulation and become a gold immortal, a saint and fiend immortal. The greedy Patriarch Muji simply smashed Arhat Wrath's skeleton and absorbed all the bone powder into his body. The fleshly body of a cultivator from the Buddhist League was a Dharma body that had been tempered countless times, and contained an enormous amount of energy essence. The amount of Buddhist energy essence in Arhat Wrath's skeleton was roughly equal to 20% of what he had in his relic. It was a very frightening amount. The energy essence of Buddhist energy essence was boundless, and Patriarch Muji's evil technique was extremely magical. After devouring Arhat Wrath's relic and golden skeleton, in just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Patriarch Muji's body was covered with a thin layer of muscles. The scarlet muscles were wriggling, and there was not even a single piece of skin on them. They looked extremely horrifying. Patriarch Muji waved his arm complacently, staring at the puppet who had transformed into Reverend Sanlu. Laughing hideously, he said, you are from Euphoria Heavenly Palace? Obediently, the puppet dropped to his knees and answered respectfully, I'm Reverend Sanlu from Euphoria Heavenly Palace, the current city lord of Anhe City. As he spoke, the celestial fiend puppet burst into tears and said, Patriarch, please seek justice for me. Palace Master is dead, and all the elders have their souls perished. The foundation of Euphoria Heavenly Palace is no more, and I'm just a wandering ghost now. In the future, I'll definitely be bullied by others." Patriarch Muji patted on his chest and said, "Don't worry. From now on, you will be the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, and also my foster son. You will now take over the foundation of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, and everything in the palace will be under your control. Arhat Wrath is dead, and from now on, the area around Anhi City will be your world. Just do whatever you want, and I will take care of you. Kill anyone who dares to disobey me." After devouring Arhat Wrath's relic, Patriarch Muji's confidence skyrocketed. Casually, he reached his hand into the ground and grabbed the storage ring left behind by Arhat Wrath, gripping it tightly in his palm. After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Muji nodded and said, "The branch of Golden Pavilion Temple is extinct. Hihi, bring some men with you and search Golden Pavilion Temple. Everything you find will be yours." As he was in a hurry to return to his fiend palace to digest today's harvest, Patriarch Muji hurriedly gave him a few words of advice, then left quickly. Before leaving, he did not forget to give Reverend San Lu a medallion carved with countless naked fiends, telling him to summon Patriarch Muji immediately if anyone dared to cause trouble in Anhi City. A dark cloud wrapped around Patriarch Muji. All of a sudden, he transformed into a beam of dark light and sped away, leaving behind his joyful laughter in the void. Although he did not obtain the energy essence left behind by the Ganoderma immortal, he had devoured Arhat Wrath, and that was worth the trip. Seeing Patriarch Muji leave, Lao Ai tilted his head and cursed under his breath, "That old fool! How could he take away that bald donkey's storage ring?" Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh, nodding his head somewhat angrily as he said, "This is the greed of an orthodox fiend immortal. Tiske, if not for the fact that we are not familiar with this place, and are looking for a backer to support us temporarily, I would have killed him as well. Tiske, Arhat Wrath's relic is useless to me now, but it is still very beneficial to you." After receiving the medallion from Reverend San Lu, Wu Qi waved his hand and said, "But, no matter what, we can occupy Anhi City with a peace of mind now." Wu Qi turned to look at Lao Ai and asked with a surprised tone, "Don't you think you still have a procedure to go through?" Lao Ai looked at Wu Qi with even more surprise and asked, "What do I lack?" Wu Qi pointed at the sky and said, "Although your cultivation base has reached the required level, what about your thunder tribulation? Why don't you transcend it this morning? How long are you going to delay it?" He gave the surroundings a glance. Apart from Madman Shui, there were only Min clan members transformed from his celestial fiend puppets. Then, he reached his hand into his forehead and pulled out 8 immortal items that glinted with a strange gleam, handing them over to Lao Ai and Madman Shui. "Here are 8 immortal items. Make do with them. Quickly transcend your thunder tribulation, and we will have one more expert of heaven immortal realm. With that, controlling Anhi City will be a piece of cake." Looking at the 8 immortal items handed over by Wu Qi, Lao Ai and Madman Shui's eyes turned green. Hastily, the pair of master and disciple stretched out their hands and grabbed all 8 immortal items. Lao Ai happily looked at the set of immortal clothes, an immortal sword, an immortal shield, and a handkerchief that could be used to capture an opponent in a large area. He nodded and said with a smile, "If you can always be this generous in the future, I'll make up my mind to follow you." Wu Qi did not say anything, thinking, as long as Lao Ai knows the severity of the situation. Those decent immortals might not even have a few immortal items, and yet, I've given you 8 of them in one go. Is there any peak stage nascent soul cultivator under the heaven who can give away a few immortal items like Wu Qi? He is definitely the only one under the heaven. With the help of immortal items, Lao Ai's transcendence of thunder tribulation was a smooth journey. There was nothing worth mentioning. The company returned to Anhi City. Immediately, Reverend San Lu ordered his clan members to set up a table and chairs in front of the city lord mansion and erected a tall flagpole. A long flag was hung on the flagpole, with a row of large characters written on it in ink, Euphoria Heavenly Palace is recruiting heroes under the heaven with great hospitality. On the walls on both sides of the main entrance of the City Lord Mansion, 2 large notices were pasted, listing the conditions and benefits of the City Lord Mansion's recruitment. Jean Dan Human Immortal, monthly salary of 10 lower-grade energy stones, a certain number of spirit pills and spirit talismans. Nascent Soul Earth Immortal, monthly salary of 100 lower-grade energy stones, a certain number of spirit pills and spirit talismans, and a certain number of gold and silver. Nascent Divinity Half Immortal, monthly salary of 100 middle-grade energy stones, a certain number of spirit pills and spirit talismans, a certain number of gold and silver, fine wine and delicacies, and even a luxurious mansion with beautiful wives. Heaven Immortal. Euphoria Heavenly Palace is a small place, so we dare not recruit Heaven Immortals for the time being. A dead silence reigned in his city when the notice was posted. Chapter 440. The sun was shining brightly. Wu Qi was sitting behind a long table in front of the City Lord Mansion, sipping a cup of fragrant tea in a leisurely manner. Placed before him were 8 small celadone plates, on which were placed 8 exquisite pastries. They were the finest pastries meticulously prepared by the chefs in the City Lord Mansion. The tea was a fine spirit tea picked from the deep mountain next to Anhe City, and the pastries were of the finest quality. Beside him were 2 pretty and obedient serving girls, fanning Wu Qi. As the cool breeze mixed with the aroma of the pastries blew gently into his nose, even Wu Qi felt that the enjoyment he was enjoying was a little depraved. The banners above his head were flapping noisily in the strong wind. Some idlers were standing carefully under the eaves across the road, looking at the commotion in this direction. From time to time, a few people dressed as itinerant cultivators would walk past the City Lord Mansion, carefully and quickly stealing a few glances at the notices pasted on both sides of the main entrance. Wu Qi noticed that some itinerant cultivators were obviously tempted, but when they were about to walk towards him, they were dragged away by their companions. Smacking his lips, Wu Qi turned and asked one of the serving girls, "It's been 2 days. Why hasn't anyone applied for the recruitment yet?" The 2 serving girls dared not say a word. Instead, they just bowed respectfully and answered in a low voice, "We have no idea." No idea? Wu Qi gulped down the tea, then grabbed 2 pieces of pine nut cake and swallowed them. After that, he clapped his hands and called out to the City Lord Mansion, "Monk, come out and keep an eye on this place. If anyone applies for the recruitment, bring him to Reverend Sanlu." I don't believe that no one is willing to apply for the recruitment with such a good offer. He rose to his feet, and as he was about to go to Anhe City to gather some information, he suddenly saw an old man clad in a long green robe hiding behind the curtain of a pill shop diagonally across the street, peering at Wu Qi through the gap between the curtain and the door with his eyes narrowed. The old man's cultivation base was merely at the early stage Jean Dan realm, and his eyes were filled with vigilance, and even a little bit of disgust. The old man was hiding behind the curtain, and half of his face was covered by the shadow of the door. If it weren't for Wu Qi's sharp eyes, how could he have found him? With a frown, Wu Qi stood up and gave his seat to the little monk, guarding heart, who had just walked out of the mansion. Then he walked towards the elixir room with a smile. Seeing that Wu Qi was walking towards him, the old man's expression immediately changed. He casually slammed the door and was about to close it. However, how could Wu Qi allow him to close the door? He moved his feet and went to the door. He put his hand on the door and greeted the old man through the curtain. "Fellow Taoist, why do you look like you have seen a ghost when you see me?" Could it be that fellow Taoist has misunderstood me? The old man's face turned blue. In a panic, he let go of the door and staggered a few steps back, cupping his fist and saying to Wu Qi with a dry voice, "Fellow Taoist, senior, I wonder how I have offended you? Haha." Even as he spoke, the old man shivered, and his teeth chattered noisily. Obviously, he was frightened by Wu Qi's sudden visit. Noises could be heard coming from all directions. Wu Qi did not need to release his divine sense. Just by looking down at the celestial fiend puppet while standing on a cloud high up in the sky, It was enough for him to know what was going on in the surroundings. The managers and workers of the dozens of nearby shops that were related to cultivators had carefully walked out of their rooms, coming up with various excuses to greet each other. But all of them had their eyes fixed on Wu Qi. Looking back at those people in astonishment, those shopkeepers and waiters immediately scattered like birds and beasts. One by one, they hurriedly returned to their own shops. There were even a few timid ones who directly closed their doors and hung up a sign saying that they were closed. Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the sky blankly. It was noon, and the sun was shining brightly in the sky. Closed? Are you trying to show the ghost that you are closing? Laughing dryly, Wu Qi walked into the pill shop, cupped his fist and said to the old man with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, don't panic and don't be afraid. I don't have any evil intentions. I just have something I need to consult with you." With trembling hands, the old man picked up a piece of cloth and wiped a clean shelf beside him. Laughing dryly, he said, "What questions do you have, senior? I'll definitely tell you everything I know. You can just ask me anything you want." Wu Qi rolled his eyes and asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, which sect or sect are you from?" With a thud, the old man dropped to his knees, kowtowed heavily and said, "Have mercy on me, senior. Please have mercy on me. I come from a small sect, and 9 days ago, one of my seniors died tragically in the mountains. Now, there are no seniors in the sect who can take charge. Sob, if senior has taken a fancy to my little foundation, you can just take it. It was not easy for me to cultivate arduously for 300 years to form the Jin Dan. Please spare my life, senior." Stunned, Wu Qi stared blankly at the old man, whose face was stained with tears and snot. It took him a long while before he came back to his senses and said, "Am I really that scary?" The old man continued to kowtow heavily and sob. "Senior Arhat Rath from the land of phaseless Buddhism has undergone nirvana. Golden Pavilion Temple was destroyed, and Jade Pagoda Temple was overturned. It was not easy for me to cultivate my cultivation base, and it took me 300 years to form the Jin Dan. Senior, please have mercy on me. I can't just throw away this little bit of pure yang I have." Wu Qi was at a loss once again. He frowned and pondered for a long while, then finally pulled the old man up and snapped, "Don't cry. Tell me what happened. If you dare to cry again, I'll peel off your skin, pull out your tendons, and banish your soul to the 9 nether hell, where you will suffer the pain of death flame day and night." The loud roar was followed by more door-slamming noises. However, the old man quickly stopped crying, wiped his face with a piece of cloth, and forced a smile onto his face. In a low voice, he bent his waist and carefully explained the strange atmosphere in Anhe City to Wu Qi. It turned out that when Jing'an was the city lord, the power balance in the regions around Anhe City was relatively balanced. Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Jade Pagoda Temple were locked in a stalemate. These two powers, who had powerful backers behind them, fought openly and covertly, and reached a balance. Naturally, the other small powers were happy to seek development in the gap. When Jing'an became the city lord and governed Anhe City with the mind of a Buddhist cultivator, these small powers lived a much better life. However, in less than half a month, the situation had changed drastically. Euphoria Heavenly Palace had razed Jade Pagoda Temple and sent their army to Golden Pavilion Temple. Jing'an was killed, and Reverend Sanlu was replaced as the city lord. Although Reverend Sanlu was an evil cultivator, as long as Golden Pavilion Temple remained standing, the two powers would still be evenly matched. At most, Reverend Sanlu would be greedy and ask for a bigger share, but the other small powers would still be able to live a peaceful life in Anhe City. However, Lu Yi and the others suddenly intervened, and Wu Qi even gave him a heavy push on his back. Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple were completely wiped out, and all the sect leaders and elders of the various powers around Anhe City were turned into ashes by Wu Qi. Even the leader of the Righteous League, Arhat Rath, was devoured by Patriarch Muji, and even his ashes were refined by Patriarch Muji. For the time being, Euphoria Heavenly Palace was the strongest power around Anhe City, and Patriarch Muji was like a dark cloud that weighed heavily on the hearts of all the disciples from the smaller powers. Euphoria Heavenly Palace had a notorious reputation, as they had always been involved in some shady business of robbing men and seducing women. As a result, their reputation in Enhi City was so bad that it could even reach 800 miles away. Now that Arhat Rath was dead, Euphoria Heavenly Palace had lost its nemesis, and all the backers of the smaller powers were killed as well. Therefore, it was impossible for the disciples of these smaller powers to not be frightened. Take the old man standing before Wu Qi as an example. The strongest Grand Elder in his sect only possessed a cultivation base of mid-stage nascent divinity realm. But, out of curiosity, he went deep into the mountains in the east, wanting to see what the remains of a Ganoderma immortal looked like. Of course, at the same time, he was thinking of taking advantage of the situation. In the end, he never returned, and even a few nascent soul sect elders were turned into ashes. Now, there were only a few weak cultivators of Jindan realm left in the sect, while Wu Qi and his company were supported by Patriarch Muji. Among these disciples from smaller powers, one could not bear to abandon the foundation of their sect, while the other was extremely afraid of Wu Qi and his company. Therefore, for the past few days, they were like ants on a hot pan. Their minds were tormented, but they did not know what to do. Although Wu Qi and his company had set up a banner to recruit itinerant cultivators to join the City Lord Mansion, the problem was that Euphoria Heavenly Palace had a very bad reputation. Which itinerant cultivator would dare to join just for the high salary? Cultivators valued their own cultivation base and energy essence the most, but Lady Qiao loved to plunder the yang energy of her own disciples. Although it was said that she had fallen, but with Euphoria Heavenly Palace's bad reputation, who would dare to join them? I see. Wu Qi looked helplessly at the old man, whose legs were trembling with fear, and asked, "Is Euphoria Heavenly Palace really that bad?" The old man laughed dryly, daring not to answer Wu Qi's question. Not only did Euphoria Heavenly Palace have a bad reputation, it was so bad that the whole street was filled with it. Each and every disciple of Euphoria Heavenly Palace was a fiend. Which cultivator dared to offend them? Even if Wu Qi were to place a real gold and silver in front of them, none of the itinerant cultivators would dare to join the City Lord Mansion just for the sake of money, let alone merely setting up a banner to recruit people. A flame of anger rose in Wu Qi's heart as he stared at the old man's dry laugh. How could he have overlooked this problem? Was Euphoria Heavenly Palace really that bad? However, now that all the seniors from the various powers around Enhi City were dead, why would he bother to reason with these cultivators who stayed in the city? With a cold snort, Wu Qi patted on the old man's shoulder, spun and walked out of the pill room. Unhurriedly, he came to the front door of the City Lord Mansion, pulled down the 2 notices hanging on the door, and flew up into the sky. Mustering his innate energy, Wu Qi cried out sternly, "All itinerant cultivators in Enhi City, listen up. From today onwards, all of you are the outer sect disciples of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. There will be no monthly salary, and the only way out for you is to bow your head and obey my orders obediently." Casually, he threw a few thunderbolts out and destroyed a few buildings in the city. From today onwards, all the shops in the city will be the property of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. All the shopkeepers and workers, as well as those whose cultivation base is above the peak stage Hotian realm, get the hell out of here and register in the City Lord Mansion right now. From today onwards, all of you are the outer sect disciples of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Whoever dares to refuse, I'll kill him. Whoever dares to conceal the accounts, I'll kill him. Whoever dares to hide his wealth, I'll kill him. While throwing several dozens of thunderbolts in all directions, Wu Qi howled at the top of his voice. In short, from today onwards, Euphoria Heavenly Palace will unify Enhi City. Those who submit to us will prosper, and those who oppose us will perish. All cultivators, make a register of all the assets of your sect and submit them to me today. Those who disobey will be killed. Panting, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, I'll guarantee the safety of all the outer sect disciples who join Euphoria Heavenly Palace today. Those who join us after today, will inevitably be turned into cultivation vessels. Suddenly, a great commotion broke out in the city, as large groups of cultivators ran out from all directions, either riding on clouds or riding on flying swords, as they raced towards the city lord mansion with all their might. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, the city lord mansion was completely surrounded by several tens of thousands of cultivators. Each and every one of them was screaming and yelling at the top of their lungs, crying and begging Reverend Sanlu to quickly recruit them. Wu Qi was delighted by the scene, and suddenly he burst out laughing. Chapter 441. Out of habit, Wu Qi became a hands-off shopkeeper, and for the past few days, all he could think of was to enter a secluded cultivation and heal his wounds. After being nourished by the blind old man's spirit tea, 90% of the aura of death in his body had been healed. Through Wu Qi's own efforts, 1 month later, all the aura of death in Wu Qi's body was gone, and his wounds were fully healed. The aura of death transformed by his innate nascent soul had helped Wu Qi's dragon transformation step into the realm of 35 transformations, and the overall strength of his fleshly body had been improved by a few times. However, all the cultivators with slightly higher cultivation base in the vicinity of Anhe City had been wiped out by Wu Qi. Among those who had joined Reverend San Li's sect, the 3 nascent soul cultivators could be considered as the best, the over 50 Jindan cultivators could be considered as the outstanding ones, and the rest of them were Xiantian cultivators. They could barely control a flying sword and fly several tens of miles from the ground, and they could be considered as cultivators. Green Pill Sect, your former sect? Wu Qi turned and gave Eugene a look. Wu Qi did not care where he was, but just stared with his eyes wide and cried out fiercely, "Green City?" Heaven-breaking sword sect's sword of fire, the sword of 5 elements, was unleashed. Together with a towering flame, a crimson sword shadow plunged whistling down, enveloping the entire green forest mountain. A loud boom rang out as the flame towered 100,000 feet into the sky. 2 cliffs in front of them were shattered to pieces, and the raging flame spread in all directions, engulfing all the nearby woods and woods. Grabbing Eugene, Wu Qi transformed into a beam of dark light and shot up into the sky. Following Eugene's direction, he quickly flew towards a lofty mountain 10,000 miles to the west. The mountain was where Eugene's former sect, the Green Pill Sect, was located. The Green Pill Sect was quite famous in the area around Anhe City for their skill in concocting spirit pills. It was by harvesting the medicinal herbs they grew themselves and concocting spirit pills for sale that they managed to establish a small base in Anhe City. Holding his head up proudly, the middle-aged Taoist cried out coldly, "What a reckless fool! I'm Yun Zun of Green City, and I've been ordered to build a mansion here. Since you dare to come and make trouble, you can stay here forever." Benefactor, are you being robbed of your money or your body? Why aren't you wearing anything on your body? How strange. You're a man. Could it be that you've been raped? After a brief pause, Taoist Yunzong cried out with a somewhat fanatical voice, "My master is Reverend Li Yang, the grandson of the ancestral master of Green City. We are just ants." The ants were like immortal cultivators, and the spring water in all directions was the vast and immeasurable great Tao of heaven and earth. A single misstep could mean death. The great Tao of heaven and earth was vast and boundless, and no one knew where the end was. Wu Qi, who was standing on the shore, looked at the spring that was only a few dozen feet in radius. Naturally, he could see through the truth of the spring at a glance, but how could the ant, who was in the middle of the situation, see through it? How could he see through it? Wu Qi patted on Eugene's shoulder, smiled and said, "Now, you and I are both members of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Hidden Heart and Guarded Heart are also my saviors. Although they didn't really save me, I still owe them this favor." Taoist Yunzong said proudly, "I am Green City of Xianyang." While smiling, Wu Qi's eyes suddenly went wide. A supreme sword energy shot up to nearly 10,000 feet high from the top of his head, transforming into a huge red sword shadow and slashing down viciously. "Those who are alive in there, come out and face your death." Your master Taoist is here to wipe out your entire clan. How can you call yourselves cultivators? Shaking his head, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. Just as Wu Qi flew for less than 100 miles, 12 dark beams caught up with him at top speed. Their faces were brimming with killing intent as they let out low cries and followed closely behind Wu Qi. Wu Qi's heart was filled with killing intent at the moment, as his state of mind had affected the emotions of these celestial fiend puppets. As they got closer and closer to Greenwood Mountain, the killing intent emanating from them grew stronger and stronger. Gradually, it turned into a large sheet of dark smoke and coiled around their bodies. Apart from that, the mines near Anhe City needed people to mine, the herb fields needed people to take care of them, and all other industries needed people to manage. It was unrealistic to expect these people to contribute much combat strength to Wu Qi, but they were more than enough to help Wu Qi with all sorts of chores. Taoist Yunzong waved his hand casually. The wind and clouds around Wu Qi changed, and he suddenly found himself trapped in an illusion. Reverend Li Yang. He was Reverend Li Yang from Green City. As for the other several tens of thousands of people, Wu Qi could only stand in the courtyard of the City Lord Mansion with his hands clasped behind his back. How can you call yourself a cultivator with over 30,000 Hotian cultivators here? How can you call yourself a cultivator after spending so many years on a place like Pangu Continent, a place with abundant natural energy? While Wu Qi's mind was wandering in all directions, pondering over these mysterious questions, the front door of the courtyard was suddenly pushed open by someone. Eugene, an old man of early-stage Jin Dan realm whom Wu Qi met a few days ago, ran into the courtyard with a panicked expression. Senior, bad news. Two grandmasters have been killed. Suddenly, the wind stopped blowing in the backyard of the City Lord Mansion, and the trees stopped swaying. Everything seemed to have frozen. Accompanied by a strange sizzling noise, tiny wisps of sword energy shot out from Wu Qi's body. Apart from Eugene, all the flowers, trees, courtyards, and pavilions in the backyard were turned into fine dust at the same time. The suffocating pressure made Eugene stand stiffly before Wu Qi, not daring to make even the slightest movement. He suddenly had a feeling that with just a glance from Wu Qi, he would be turned into a wisp of smoke. On the left side of the green cliff wall, a row of large characters painted with human blood could be seen. They were very eye-catching. Forbidden land. Trespassers will be killed. This is a good item. It can calm the mind and suppress the flame of heart. What a good item. Fiddling with the bracelet, Wu Qi laughed out loud. Wu Qi's heart gave a jerk. He focused all his divine will on the tiny ant, and with a sudden change of mind, the poor ant vanished into thin air under the pressure of his divine will. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi turned around and shouted at Eugene, "Don't panic." What happened? Raising his head, Wu Qi stared at the drifting clouds in the sky, and suddenly he was lost in thought. Could it be that in the eyes of some existences, the vast heavenly Tao was just a tiny spring, and Wu Qi and all the other immortal cultivators were like ants on a flower petal, struggling and fighting with each other? Wu Qi stared at the red ant in a trance, and suddenly he laughed happily. Wu Qi had never paid much attention to these chores, but never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Lao AI was actually an expert in management. Under Lao AI's management, these several tens of thousands of itinerant cultivators were assigned to various posts in Anhe City according to their specialties. In just 3 to 5 days, the operation of Anhe City was back to normal. Specialty products from all over the city were gathered in the city, and then transported to other places through the newly formed caravans with the signboard of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. A huge profit was about to be earned. "How dare you!" A light shout came from Greenwood Mountain. With a sweep of a green ray, the flame that blotted the sky was swept away. Nevertheless, these itinerant cultivators were still of some use. At least, the city was managed by someone, the city defenses were taken care of, the gutters were dredged, and the latrines were cleaned. Wu Qi was not in the mood to cultivate these itinerant cultivators, so he simply organized them into a team of city management and let them do whatever they wanted. With his body stiff, Eugene nodded and said, "Yes, This is where my master used to be. But now. Trembling, Eugene came before Wu Qi and stammered, "Little brother, I was ordered to bring Master's hidden heart and guarding heart to the base of Green Pill sect to collect some herbs. But someone suddenly broke in, claiming that they were going to seize the base of Green Pill sect and build an immortal's cave. I advised the two masters not to fight with them, but when the two masters hesitated, they were killed by a sword." Green City. Xianyang Green City. A middle-aged Taoist, clad in a white Taoist robe with a sage-like appearance, walked out slowly with steady steps. Smiling, Wu Qi picked up the relics and pointed his finger at them. A ray of light flew out and fused them together, transforming into 18 silver pearls the size of egg yolks. Then he took out a thread of natural silk, carefully strung the 18 pearls into a bracelet, and put it on his wrist. A series of dripping noises was heard as 108 thumb-sized, pearl-like fleshly body relics fell to the ground from Hidden Heart's body. There were also some relics left in Guarding Heart's body, but there were only 12 of them, and they were only the size of a broad bean. "Whoever kills you, I, Wu Qi, will definitely pay them back 100 times. Wu Qi pressed his palm on Hidden Heart's corpse. A ball of purple and green flame burst out, turning him into a wisp of green smoke and dissipating in the air. After that, he unleashed another stream of divine flame of order, burning Guarding Heart's corpse into ashes as well. Standing quietly in the backyard of the City Lord Mansion, Wu Qi had a spring in front of him. A few leaves and petals were spinning on the crystal-clear surface of the spring. On one of the petals, a red ant was crawling around in panic. But no matter where he went, he would bump into the water after a few steps. The ant was spinning around in panic, not knowing how to escape. But now, all the elders of the Azure Pill sect had been annihilated, and the remaining members of the Azure Pill sect, including Eugene, had joined the Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Thus, the Azure Forest Mountain where the Azure Pill sect was located had become the territory of the Euphoria Heavenly Palace. However, as the current Euphoria Heavenly Palace under Wu Qi's control did not have enough manpower to station here, Greenwood Mountain had become an empty mountain. Suddenly, the little monk's somewhat naive and cunning voice rang out in Wu Qi's ears. Not long ago, the little monk had bumped into Wu Qi, who was severely wounded, and brought him back to Temple of Hidden Heart out of kindness. This pair of master and disciple were very affectionate and loyal, and they were a very good couple. Holding Eugene in his hand, Wu Qi landed on the ground and walked slowly before Hidden Heart. He lifted up the old monk's drooping head and gave him a closer look. There was a large hole on the old monk's forehead. Obviously, the relic was either taken away by someone, destroyed, or had broken through the void and fled. But no matter what was left here was just a dead body. There was no need to look at the little monk, Guarding Heart. Even Hidden Heart, who had stepped into the realm of Arhat, was in such a situation. How could he be any better? In just one day, all the cultivators in Anhui City had become Reverend San Li's disciples and grand-disciples, and in other words, Wu Qi's disciples and grand-disciples. Wu Qi scanned these itinerant cultivators with his divine will, who only had about 30 to 50 years of cultivation base. He wished he could slap them all to death with just one slap. What was the use of having these guys as his subordinates? Even those seafood subordinates of Lord Xianxing were much stronger than them. At the very least, if they were in the ocean, a single great white shark could easily kill 300 to 500 of these itinerant cultivators. All of a sudden, Wu Qi came to a halt. Right at the entrance of Greenwood Mountain, between two towering green cliffs that towered into the clouds, two wooden stakes were erected in front of the memorial archway, which was originally carved with the words Greendan Sect. The bloody corpses of Hidden Heart and Guarding Heart were stripped naked and hung on the stakes as a warning to the public. Chapter 442. There were countless illusions in front of him, including cities, mountains, rivers, humans, beasts, birds, fishes, flowers, trees, and all kinds of strange things. There were also mountains of gold and seas of silver, and beautiful women who could topple a nation dancing on the ocean of blood. With just a thought, his soul would be dragged out of his body by this boundless environment, and naturally, there would be heavenly thunders and earthly flames that would smash and shatter his soul. With just a casual wave of his hand, Taoist Yunzong could produce such illusions that could directly attack one's soul. It showed that his magical power and divine ability had reached a certain realm. When those immortals who were used to using flying swords and talismans were caught by Taoist Yunzong, they would be subdued by him unknowingly, and with a slight carelessness, their souls would perish. The legacy of Tao in Green City was indeed extraordinary, a few levels higher than the abilities of ordinary immortals. Exercising the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi glanced at the illusions around him and nodded his head in admiration. His mystic eyes of universe could now peer several hundred miles deep into the ground. In his eyes, all rocks and sand were like clear water. However, no matter how hard he exercised his divine ability and magical power to look at this thin layer of illusions, all he could see were clouds and smoke lingering around him, making him look both real and unreal at the same time. He could not see anything. What a good technique, a good divine ability, and a good magical power. Wu Qi praised inwardly. Suddenly, he raised both hands up and cried out, "Are you the senior immortal from Green City of Xianyang Heavenly Realm? This is a misunderstanding. I'm the new chief supervisor of Euphoria Heavenly Palace's outer sect. This is all a misunderstanding." Taoist Yunzong snorted coldly. With a casual point of his finger, he strengthened the illusions around Wu Qi, then said mockingly in a low voice, "Since you could destroy my base just because of a misunderstanding, then if it was not a misunderstanding, wouldn't you have already brought your men to kill me? With your mere peak stage nascent soul cultivation base, and the few puny Jindan cultivators around you, how dare you ask me to die?" Wu Qi let out a few panicked roars, then snapped, "Of course it is a misunderstanding. Since Master Immortal wants to build a Taoist Rite Temple around Anhe City, Euphoria Heavenly Palace can manage it. Wouldn't it be much more convenient for the Immortal Master to do all the work by himself? Since Master Immortal has opened up a Tao Rite ground, you will definitely need to recruit disciples. Junior can help Master Immortal find several hundred disciples with spiritual roots to take as disciples." The transformation of the illusion came to an abrupt stop. Then clouds and smoke drifted away, and all the illusions shattered inch by inch, revealing Taoist Yunzong, who had his head held high and his nostrils pointed at Wu Qi. "You have such intentions. I'm very happy. Since that's the case, follow me in. Let's talk about how you're going to help me build this Tao venue. I'll say the ugly words first. If you lie to me, I can't be bothered to say what will happen to you." With a flick of his sleeve, a plume of green smoke rushed out from Taoist Yunzang's side, wrapping around Wu Qi and his company as they flew into the depths of Greenwood Mountain. Originally, the most important place of the Green Pill sect was a few rows of small wooden and bamboo houses, scattered in a picturesque manner in a valley inside the Green Forest Mountain. As Taoist Yunzong had just arrived, although he had chosen Greenwood Mountain as his Tao Rite ground, he did not have the time to renovate the place. As a result, the place still looked the same as when Green Pill sect was built. 8 young Taoists were seen holding various formation discs and flags in their hands, deploying defensive mechanisms around the valley. Originally, the defensive formation of Green Pill sect was ridiculously weak, and obviously, Taoist Yunzong did not think highly of it. Apart from these 8 disciples, there were also 4 Taoist children, 2 boys and 2 girls, who looked to be around 12 to 13 years old. They were all the men Taoist Yunzong had brought to Greenwood Mountain. 4 Taoist Yunzong, who had the cultivation base of a 27th tier heaven immortal, 8 disciples and 4 Taoist children were a little shabby. On top of that, when Wu Qi walked past the 8 disciples, he gave them a quick glance. The formation discs and flags used by Taoist Yunzong were not of good quality, as they were mainly forged from 100-year-old dark iron. Among all formation discs and flags, they were considered as the lowest grade. Although the grade of the formation was not low, the materials used to construct the formation were too poor. As a result, the power of the formation could only stop heaven immortals below the 34th tier. They were the poor, unlucky fellows who were sent by Green City to Pangu continent to open up their own territory. After a few days of investigation, Wu Qi had learned that being sent to Pangu continent to establish a Taoist Rite Temple was not an honorable task. If the Taoist Rite Temple was established in a place where no immortal sects had a foothold, the official power of Yu Dynasty, who served the human emperor, would stop them from doing so. If it were a place like He City, where the immortal sects had already divided their territories and established their footholds, the competition would be particularly fierce. If not for the incident with Lu Yi and Wu Qi's interference by plotting against Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath, causing one of the leaders of the righteous and evil sects to die, and the other to enter a secluded cultivation, Taoist Yunzong would have to bear the brunt of the joint suppression from both men if he dared to establish a Taoist Rite Temple in He City. Patriarch Muji represented the clan of Fiend Immortals, while Arhat Wrath was a disciple of the Buddhist League, and Green City was a figure of the Orthodox Taoist League. Originally, He City was in a situation where the righteous and evil sects were evenly divided. If the righteous Taoist League wanted to take a slice of the pie, it would be strange if Taoist Yunzong did not have his head riddled with bumps. However, the situation had changed. Taoist Yunzong had appeared at the right place at the right time. Wu Qi did not believe it was a coincidence. Perhaps, this fellow was instructed by some influential figures in Green City, and came to He City to test the waters. If Taoist Yunzong could establish a foothold in He City smoothly, the powers of Green City might invade the city on a large scale. But, if Taoist Yunzong suffered a head-on defeat here, Green City would immediately pull back their hands, cease all activities and lay low. That was why Taoist Yunzong was so merciless, killing Hidden Heart and Guarding Heart with his sword right after he appeared. At the thought of the bloody corpses of Hidden Heart and Guarding Heart, Wu Qi felt a twitching pain in his heart. But he could not attack Taoist Yunzong now. Firstly, Taoist Yunzang's cultivation base was too strong, and Wu Qi did not have the overall strength to do anything to him. Secondly, if he really did something to Taoist Yunzong, how was he going to summon the person behind him? Coincidentally, his master was Reverend Liang from Green City. He was the man who had schemed against Lady Dark Goldwater and trapped her on Shui Yuan planet for several hundreds of thousands of years. Therefore, Wu Qi had to find a way to deal with Reverend Liang, and find a way to trick him. With his head held high, Taoist Yunzong brought Wu Qi and the others to a great banyan tree that stood 1,000 feet tall, with a canopy that stretched for several miles. This big banyan tree already had its own climate. Looking at its shape and appearance, it was at least hundreds of thousands of years old. According to common sense, a tree like this should have formed its demon essence crystal core, and as long as it could survive the heavenly fire and thunder tribulation, it would be able to transform into a human and become a demon immortal. However, right in the middle of the main trunk of this great banyan tree, 7 demon-suppressing nails forged from purple gold were hammered deep into the trunk, completely wiping out the possibility of the tree transforming into a demon. On the caps of these nails, a vermilion seal was clearly branded. A certain great oracle of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials had killed this tree on a certain day in a certain month in a certain year. It was an official act of Yu Dynasty, as the great oracle of Yu Dynasty had personally suppressed the banyan tree and wiped out its innate spirituality. From then on, this great tree could only be a tree, and could no longer cultivate into a demon spirit. This was also one of the main duties of Yu Dynasty's Directorate of Celestials, which was to completely wipe out all the roots that could cultivate into demon immortals, ghost immortals, and fiend immortals in Yu Dynasty, nipping them in the bud. Right under the main trunk of the great tree was a round table made from the roots of the old banyan tree, and a few round stools were placed on both sides of the table using the aerial roots of the old banyan tree. Taoist Yunzong sat down on one of the stools casually, then pointed at the one next to him and said coolly, "Forget it. I still don't know your Taoist name, little friend." Wu Qi gave the cautious Eugene a look, then cupped his fist and bowed to Taoist Yunzong with a smile on his face, then sat down on the stool respectfully. Licking his lips, Wu Qi chuckled and said, I call myself Greed, and I'm now the chief supervisor of the outer sect under Reverend San Lu of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, in charge of all the outer sect affairs. I was rude today, as I didn't know that Green City's immortal master is going to open up a Taoist rite temple here. That's why I came here recklessly. Please forgive me, immortal master. Taoist Yunzong snorted coldly as he gave Wu Qi an appraising glance, then waved his hand arrogantly and said, "Ignorance is not a crime." It seems I was too impatient. Who are those two little monks to you? Wu Qi was so furious that he struck out with his sword and destroyed the main entrance of Greenwood Mountain. Naturally, Taoist Yunzong had witnessed the commotion, and that was why he asked the question. Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "They are the two sinecures who have sought refuge in Euphoria Heavenly Palace. As you know, the overall strength of Euphoria Heavenly Palace has been greatly weakened. That monk Hidden Heart is a heaven immortal after all, just that his dermic power and cultivation base are slightly weaker. Initially, we were hoping that he could bring us more benefits." Before Taoist Yunzong could say anything, Wu Qi flattered him and said respectfully, "But, with Senior guarding Greenwood Mountain with a great immortal like you as our backer, that monk Hidden Heart is dead, isn't it? He's just a deadball donkey. Hee, it's not a big deal. Instead, Euphoria Heavenly Palace will have to rely on Senior in the future. Senior, you don't have to be so courteous with us. If there's anything we can do for you, just let us know." 4 little Taoists, 2 men and 2 women, came walking quickly over and served tea to Taoist Yunzong and Wu Qi. However, Taoist Yunzang's disciples were indeed snobbish. The teacup Taoist Yunzong used was a fine, sky-green porcelain teacup with a pale blue hue, while the one placed in front of Wu Qi was a fist-sized, black pottery utensil. After serving tea to Taoist Yunzong, 4 little Taoists stood on the left and right side of Taoist Yunzong, tilting their heads up and pointing their 8 nostrils at Wu Qi. Taoist Yunzong did not offer them the tea, but simply picked up the teacup and took a sip from it, then said coolly, "That means Euphoria Heavenly Palace is backed by Patriarch Muji as well. That old fiend's cultivation base is just SOSO, but his ancestral master is a very famous figure." Muji smiled. He bowed slightly, looked at Taoist Yunzong, and said, "Isn't the person behind Patriarch Muji Patriarch Xian Yi from the Dark Palace in Hui Ming Heavenly Realm? Green City doesn't care about the Dark Palace at all. Frankly speaking, I'm not from Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Hee, what does that Dark Palace have to do with me?" Taoist Yunzong clapped his hands, then looked at Wu Qi and praised, "Excellent. Little friend, it is the right thing to think in this way. Patriarch Xian Yi is merely a 16th tier gold immortal, but my master, Reverend Liang, is a 7th tier gold immortal." Wu Qi clapped his hands as well and said, "That's right. Now, I'll use all the resources I have to build a magnificent Taoist rite temple for Senior and recruit several hundred disciples with excellent aptitudes." Ha! Wu Qi threw his head back and laughed loudly. Taoist Yunzong nodded his head and said with a smile, "I'll remember your contribution. When the rite temple is opened, I can invite my master to come as well. If my master appreciates your contribution, he might even take you as his in-name disciple." Wu Qi and Taoist Yunzong exchanged a glance, then burst into laughter at the same time. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.